Propulsion continues to be nominal.
Our UPA chamber pressure looks good. Doubling up. Roger roll, Atlantis.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight outside SCE off. Off. Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another day of testing down in Starbase, Texas. You're looking live at Starship 24, which is, of course, out at one of the suborbital pads preparing for some more testing. We've already seen some static fires on that vehicle, and today there is an alert notice for more static fire testing, which could, of course, include Ship 24, could also include some more testing on Booster 7, which is, of course, on the orbital launch mount behind it. And so we're going to be keeping an eye on both of those vehicles. Right now, the pad has been cleared, and you can see a little bit of venting from over near the tank farm. So it appears the systems are beginning to spool up for more testing today, and so we have spooled up our live commentary to keep you up to date on the latest happenings in the Starship program down in Texas. My name is Thomas Burkhart. I am the news director here at NASA Space Flight, and I'll be one of your hosts for today's live coverage for now. And I am joined by a couple of my good friends. First of all, Adrian Bile is on commentary with us today. Adrian, how you doing?
Hello everyone, and as we can see right here, the ground line is freezing. Just wanted to point that out while I'm being introduced. And yeah, this is the third day of being introduced. Engine testing, and I see here myself. But yeah, third day of engine testing in this week, and I'm looking forward to whatever happens today. Alert notice makes this even more exciting.
Yeah, of course, as usual, going into these test days, we don't know exactly what is planned. SpaceX does not announce their testing plans down in Texas. However, sometimes we will get an official confirmation from them after the fact to know exactly how many engines are fired, because sometimes it's not super clear or something like that. But our best informed speculation based on the alert notice is that it will at least include static fire testing, firing engines at thrust. And so we're going to keep an eye on which vehicle or both may be involved in that. In addition to myself and Adrian, we also have Chris Gebhardt, the assistant managing editor for NASA Spaceflight, as a commentator. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. How about yourself, Thomas?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for joining us. Glad to have you all here. Also, a quick shout out to Mr. Michael Baylor in the background, who is operating today's stream. Again, we're going to be live throughout the day of testing. The test window, as standard recently, has been from 10 a.m. Central Time to 10 p.m. Central Time. Of course, we're in the early afternoon down there in Texas, so it will be interesting to see how late testing goes today. But if it's anything like the previous days, it could be a full day with a lot of different tests over the course of the window. As usual, while we kind of wait for testing to spool up here, we will of course have live Q&A. So if you've got questions about what you're seeing or anything regarding the Starship program that you'd like the team here at NSF to discuss, please tag us at NASA Spaceflight in chat. We'll be reading those questions as much as we can and trying to answer them best we can. We'll also, of course, be acknowledging any super chat messages that come in. We do want to thank everyone who sends support to the streams, because that allows us to do what we do and bring you this coverage. So let's do a brief recap in case anyone missed the previous couple of days of events down in Starbase. Adrian, you want to give us a quick rundown as to the tests that SpaceX has completed the last couple of days and what they might want to build on for today?
Yeah, sure. We had some very exciting days after us, because I think the big thing, we saw the first ever Booster 7 static fire on the orbital launch mount, which was performed by a single engine, which looked amazing. I think it looked very clean. That's what we pointed out here on stream. It looked like a very good static fire. And then we also saw Ship 24 joining the fun with also a static fire, which was later confirmed by SpaceX to be a 2-engine static fire. So yeah, both vehicles already in the action so far this week, and yeah, we're looking forward to whatever will happen here today. And if we again see both vehicles being in the action, if it's maybe only one, I think so far we can probably lean to the direction that Booster 7 at least looks like is doing something.
All right, so we'll keep an eye out, and of course, the key signs to which vehicle will be tested will, of course, be when the vehicles themselves start showing signs of propellant loading. Right now, you see the vapors near the bottom of the orbital launch mount. That's an indicator that they're starting to flow cold fluids, aka propellants, towards the orbital launch mount. Do I have that right, Adrian?
That is at least in some ground. Like a pipe that goes in that direction. I think we never verified what exactly is in that pipe.
Sure.
But yeah, it's always what we have to say here. It always spools up very early, and it's not like we cannot say okay they're in propellant loading here
Right.
already or something. But it's a good indicator that at least the orbital tank farm is doing something here.
Gotcha. All right, well, let's dive into some questions here because we do have a few. First one asks, are the chopsticks up? Where are the chopsticks at? We can't see them in this exact image. There we go. They have been raised up there. Could that be a sign? Is that another sign in support of booster testing?
I'd say from the limited evidence that we have, yes. Although I think whatever is now vent. I think that's just a trick. The vent is actually like from way behind the booster there.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
yeah. There we go. I was like, because man, if it started venting right when I started answering the question, that was some good timing. Thank you, SpaceX. No, to answer your question, based on the available evidence we have, and Adrian, please correct me if I'm wrong. We have seen the chopsticks rise when they do plan to do some sort of an ignition thing with the engines on the booster. We first saw this after the booster returned to the pad following the what are we calling it? The boom, the non-standard test configuration that earlier in August or earlier in July that caused it to have to go back to get repaired, and for the chopsticks to get repaired too. And after that, for testing, we've been seeing them raise the arms. So good indication from my perspective that this is indicating that the booster will be involved today.
All right, sounds exciting. Another question here. This question we've gotten like 10 times in the first 2 minutes of the stream. So, how many engines would we be potentially expecting them to fire today? So we saw so far they fired 1 on Booster 7 and they fired 2 over on Ship 24, right?
I think for booster there are 2 potential paths how they could approach this. The one way is that they will fire no other engines in a single configuration. That could be the case.
Like
Or they
other
could-
engines, but one at a time, you're saying?
Yeah, basically they could go around the ring and start to fire more and more. Like, not more, but like engine by engine. The other idea could be that they start to fire more engine at once. So, yeah, it's kind of hard to completely say which direction they're going, because they took it very conservatively at first and fired just 1 engine. So now the question is, did they do that to make sure it's not that much thrust, or did they do that to first test every single engine in a single configuration? So that's something we don't know at this point.
That would be interesting because all of those engines get tested at McGregor prior to coming over to Starbase, and so I wonder what the value is in firing each individual engine once it's installed on the booster. I mean, obviously that tests systems that you can't test at McGregor, like its connection specifically with the booster. But you could also test that by firing multiple engines at once, and seemingly, like from a logistics standpoint, it would seem easier to conduct a smaller number of tests and test multiple engines at once. Also, obviously, at some point, the engines are going to have to fire together because that's how the booster works in flight.
It might also be a factor of getting to know the orbital launch mount configurations and characteristics a little bit better, right? So starting low and sort of ramping up, and I know like on some past streams we've talked about it, and it's worth mentioning it again, when all 33 of these actually light together, or well, light for liftoff, or are all up and running at the same time, it will be the most number of engines on a single stage that have ever been lit at the same time. It will surpass the N1, and it will surpass the Soyuz, and there's some argument there about how many engines the Soyuz actually has,
Right.
because of combustion chambers versus engines. But I mean, in no uncertain circumstances will it beat the N1, which had 31. That was the Soviet version of the Apollo era moon rocket. back in the 60s and 70s. So this could be about getting to know the orbital launch mount better, getting to know how the booster is behaving, validating certain things that maybe now that you've got engines producing thrust might give you a little bit better data. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we saw like an incremental buildup as they really start to learn what the various properties are. I mean, especially since we saw, last month, no one expected that boom. No one expected there to be trapped methane in there, and there was. So, learning curves are still kind of high on these systems, even though SpaceX has a way of making this look easy, right, to the outside observer. It's very, very hard and difficult.
Want to have a fun fact here, by the way, if I'm not doing my
Sure.
math correctly. So, to my knowledge, the N1 was the rocket with the highest amount of thrust ever fired on this planet, right? With 45.4 meganewton. And
Is that more
if-
than a shuttle stack or?
No, it's
with
more
the
than a
Should-
shuttle, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm double checking with Saturn V here. Just to be sure before I deploy this fan fact, but I think Saturn V was less thrust.
The Saturn V first stage produced a maximum thrust of 35,100 kilonewtons at sea level.
So,
Oh, yep, that would be less.
So,
Less.
with 20 Raptor engines that are on the outer ring here, times 2.3 meganewton per engine, we are at 46. So once they get into the area where they fire all of these 20 at once, that would beat both the Saturn V and the N1 on thrust.
And that's not even the full engine complement on the booster. That's just the outer ring.
Yep.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, there you
And-
go. That gives you an
and-
idea.
It does, and it kind of makes sense, right? Like when we just start talking about how many engines do you need to sort of, go beyond the thrust historical max, because this thing is literally designed to do twice of what the Apollo Saturn V did in thrust. So, yeah, makes sense when you sort of look at it in that guise as to how only 20 engines could get you to that very quickly.
Right. So talking about how many engines they could potentially be firing today, I think Adrian offers two very plausible paths forward: firing other single-engine static fires on the booster, or firing multiple engines at once. It would probably seem to be a pretty large leap if they went straight to firing all 20 at once, but this today could be part of working up to that, maybe. Of course, a lot of people are then asking, when are they going to install the other 13 engines so that you have the full engine complement back on the booster? And so that would install 13 more engines, which is, I'm trying to remember how exactly they're oriented on the booster. I remember in the latest iteration, is there still a cluster of 3 central engines?
I think it's 2010-3, right?
Okay,
Oh,
well, I
right,
thought,
no,
yeah.
Okay, yeah. So another ring of 10 engines inside the outer ring, and then the 3 central engines. So those engines are currently not installed on the booster. They were removed as a result of that spin prime test failure, and have not been replaced yet. This question specifically is asking, do you think Booster 7 will have to be rolled back to the production site, or can they install those engines at the orbital launch mount? And I believe we've at least seen hardware like at that install stand where they know that they can go and work on and install engines out at the launch site, right?
Yeah, and that new lift platform that they have probably makes it a lot easier to get into the engine section and to get and to do that type of servicing, because if you think about it too, it would make sense that they would want to be able to do this out at the launch pad, right? Because if you do get a booster back or a ship back, right, and you catch them and you've seen something in the data from that flight that makes you go, oh, we want to swap out Boost Raptor 5, whatever, I'm making up numbers now. You would want to be able to grab that engine out of the booster on the launch pad instead of having to lift the booster back off the mount, put it on a transporter, bring it all the way back. Right? It's sort of like destroys your rapid turnaround. I mean, Thomas, you're sort of familiar with this from the aviation perspective a little bit, right? I mean, you want to be able, it's sort of the same thing. You want to be able to repair some things from on your airplane at the gate while it's getting serviced for another flight, right? Instead of towing it to a hangar if you can avoid that.
Right, exactly. And that feeds right into, full and rapid reusability, as Elon likes to call it. You don't want to remove vehicles from their operational areas for maintenance if you don't have to. Obviously, there comes a point where repairs are so extensive that you would need to do that, but it looks like, replacing engines does not fall into that category. So, to answer the question, I think it is not required that they would roll back Booster 7 back to the production site. Obviously, we'll wait and see, but shouldn't be needed.
And engines can certainly be replaced on the pad. Operational vehicles have done it. And
oh yeah, true. Yeah.
And since it's a Chris on the stream, you know the vehicle I'm going to choose.
Here it is. Get ready to check it off the bingo card.
Yep.
Atlas, right?
Oh, fantastic, Adrian. I think I give you a gold star for that one for the day. Yep, the shuttle totally replaced engines out at the launch pad without having to roll back a few times.
There you go. And so tying this back in again with the number of engine firings in these tests, once those engines are installed, and of course that's going to take at least a few days at the bare minimum to get those engines installed, only then would we start talking about a 33 engine static fire, which ties into another question. Sparta Games with a super chat question actually, so thank you so much for the support. First of all, how well do we think the clamps on the orbital launch mount will be able to withstand a 33 engine static fire? Do we have any new information regarding, is the booster on its own enough to be weighed down enough that you can do a 33 engine static fire, or do you need to put a ship on top for extra weight? What's the latest we've heard on that front?
I think we have not heard some official confirmation ever by Elon, but I'm a firm believer that you cannot fire 33 engines without a fully fueled booster and a fully fueled Starship on top, because you need some sort of counterweight. We are talking about so much thrust that then would put on the that would then pull on the clamps, and then also it would pull not only on the clamps, but the clamps would then be pulled by that force, and it would pull all the way through the launch mount. So you would basically set up your whole pad for a huge amount of stress that it has to endure, because the thrust is going all that way. So I'm not sure if they would do that. I think that they would do is if they fire all 33 at once, they would do it in a ship configuration. And I think, just to follow up on that, that would also be an indicator once we are moving into the territory of a 20 engine static fire. Because I think a big indicator for that would be a fully fueled booster acting as a counterweight.
I'd agree. Yeah, you've almost certainly got to have the ship up there, and for historical reference, I think you really only need to look at how the Falcon 9s and the Falcon Heavies static fire. There's no, from a static fire perspective, there's no operational reason to fuel the second stage, because you're never igniting the second stage engine on the Falcon 9s or the Falcon Heavies during static fires. But they do it anyway, right? Part of it is taking the vehicle through a complete countdown and checking all of those systems. But the other part is the added mass that brings, because the clamps, just like for Starship, are designed to hold the fully fueled vehicle to the pad for 3 or 4 seconds as the engines come up and then release it. So it would make sense, Adrian, that they would almost have to have a fully fueled ship on top of it to static fire all 33, if they even want to do that. Because I guess the other option is they could static fire the outer 20 and then static fire the inner 13 in separate tests and say, that's good. We've got the data we need potentially for that. I guess that's also potentially an option that's out there.
I also had someone in chat pointing out that the math, including the math that Adrian just did, that assumes full thrust. And you could also very possibly just check out the health of all the engines at a partial thrust level, which would reduce the amount of force you need. And even during a launch attempt, let's say they only start up the engines at 75% thrust, I made up a number, which is enough for the mount to hold it in place. And you say, yep, all the engines look good, let's throttle up and release at the same time, and then the vehicle lifts off. So that could also be a procedure, you never know.
True, and Thomas, I'm curious because you studied part of this. um, c- I don't actually know the answer to this. Can you do that with engines? I mean, if the whole point of the engine is to ignite and go as quickly as possible to 100% thrust, can you only tell it to start up to 75, or do you have to start it up to 100 and then throttle it back after that for proper ignition?
I There should be no reason that an engine can't start at a lower than full thrust level. I Of all the rocket engine designs I have ever studied, I don't know of any that would have that kind of limitation, other than ones that simply don't throttle at all. But if you have
Well,
throttling capability, you can change your propellant flow rates and everything to start at a different thrust level. In fact, a lot of engines that go through like the development testing, like if you make a development engine for Raptor, for example, and you put it on the test stand, the first time you fire it will probably never reach a full thrust level. You'll probably only fire it at some intermediate thrust level because it's slightly lower risk. But once you have, enough engine firing data that you very much know what all the engine's performances are at different thrust levels, it would be very straightforward for you to fire 33 engines at 75% thrust, have a computer program go through all of the engine telemetry for a couple seconds and say, yep, everything here matches all of the test data we have on Raptor. These engines are all up here healthy, and you can be fairly confident that you're good to go.
I knew
But
you'd have the
then-
answer.
But then I have a follow-up question to
Yeah.
maybe why would you then fire 33 engines before the liftoff at all and not just do a 75 static fire basically staged into a liftoff?
So, like, you mean a dedicated static fire test followed by...
No,
yeah,
I-
so that's the thing. You might not have to do that.
Yeah, so basically we could, like, I think it's the total possibility that SpaceX just never does a 33 engine static fire.
Right, absolutely. That's totally
right.
possible. Because we've talked about this in previous testing before, especially with Starship flight test, where the teams go, we're going to start with a wet dress rehearsal, and if the wet dress rehearsal does really well, I guess we'll let it proceed into a static fire, and then a couple seconds into the static fire, if it looks really good, we'll just make it the flight test. Like, basically, the testing logic is get farther and farther in the countdown until something looks wrong, and if nothing looks wrong, you get to lift off. The same thing happens on pretty much all launch attempts. It's basically a static fire test until you release the rocket.
I was gonna say, yeah, everything is technically a static fire until the clamps
Until it becomes a
released.
dynamic fire, you know?
Or if SRBs are involved, that changes the dynamic a bit.
SRBs,
or until the
an
SRBs
SRB ignition comes
light.
at liftoff, so, but yeah, so all of those things feed into one another for sure. There was a second part of this question here. When do we think we could possibly see a Raptor 3 engine? What's the latest on future evolutions of Raptor?
Yeah, I mean, obviously these things are going to continue to evolve, but I mean, Adrian, have we seen a date or anything like that aside from just I appreciate the question. This is part of the difficulty in like how quickly they iterate and test that sometimes it's probably sometimes I think I'm more apt to want to say, "Oh yeah, soon." SpaceX seems to do that, but I don't think we've seen anything really definitive yet on the Raptor 3.
And they talked about 2.1 and 2.5 even before.
Right, yeah, there's
3.0,
other
right?
versions coming
Yeah.
first, maybe.
I mean, if I were really to sort of try and lay this out, I think yeah, the 2.1 and the 2.5 iterations of the Raptor 2s are what we're going to see first. They're going to want to try to gain as much as they can and improve as much as they can in the safety of the Raptor 2s first, because in all reality, it's the Raptor 2s or some variant of them that are going to be that are going to be on the human lunar landing system, right? And are going to be a part of that overall design. I think honestly, Raptor 3 at this point is probably, and I mean, I'm interested in your guys' thoughts on this too, is probably like okay, we've been up and running for a while, it's time to like go from like the Merlin C to the Merlin D at this point and just like take the efficiency and take the safety to the max based on the flight history that we now have from these. So I personally would not expect the Raptor 3 anytime soon. I think that's a like later this decade type iteration, which is still incredibly fast in the space world. Please
Well, yeah,
understand that.
compared to... yeah.
I mean, it took 30 years to go from the first iteration of the RS-25 to like the RS-25D that they were using toward the end of the shuttle program. So, yeah, I mean, rapid iteration in engines don't really happen. Yeah.
And I think the way SpaceX approaches these things, there will always be smaller things they will change about these engine anyway. So they will be probably things they are just thinking, okay, we learned something here, we want to change this part, and that does not necessarily mean it's instantly going to a new version. It will more likely evolve over time into a new engine. And I think that might be what we were seeing here as well. That there might be changes even in the Raptor 2s we are seeing already that we don't know about. That they have maybe already learned something they wanted to change a bit, and that does not mean it's a completely new engine type already.
Right. I want to bring in another question here that we've gotten here. Bisco Wolves is asking, are the cones by Ship 24 there to see if a flame trench is needed? I will say that, and this goes for previous streams that we've done these last couple of days when it's possible for dual testing of both vehicles. We're going to be showing close-ups of the vehicle that is active right now. So obviously right now we've got a close-up view and the wider shot of Booster 7 because it looks like the orbital tank farm is the equipment that's spooling up right now. If we see activity over by Ship 24, we will show that. However, if you want to see live views of everything going on, you can go ahead and check out the 24/7 feed Starbase Live. That will have all the different camera views, and you'll be able to check in on Ship 24 as well. But on this commentary stream, we will keep the focus on the vehicle that appears to be getting active. That said, I will say that there's probably better ways for them to evaluate whether a flame trench is needed by sticking cones near the launch pad. I don't think that's how they would do that. And also, keep in mind that that's a suborbital. But it's a suborbital pad. In reality, has become a test stand. That's not an operational launch pad these days. So,
And yeah, and this is a pretty good question, right? Because I mean, Thomas, I mean, really help me if I'm wrong, but like aside from small sat rockets, right, which are designed to be very portable, designed for that robustness, we are just not used to seeing gigantic vehicles like this that just don't have a flame trench.
Right.
That's very foreign to us. I mean, I will say there are rockets that do make use without them, right? I mean, Astra's rockets do not have flame trenches, or anything like that. So
They do
it's
have a
not
flame diverter, though.
right, right. And I'm wondering if sort of like the height that the booster is off the ground, sort of if that, based on like also computational fluid dynamic models, sort of give them the confidence that anything that's under there won't be a huge like vacuum suction thing like you know how you used to see when the Apollo Saturn V's ignited their engines and you would see that big plume of black kerosene as it all like a burning kerosene as it all started to ignite, and all of a sudden that would just get sucked right back down in. I'm wondering if like this design has enough confidence in those modelings to say that's not what we expect to happen here, therefore we don't need a diverter and we don't need a trench, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's a pretty open pad as well, right? There's pretty
Yeah.
big gaps between these pillars. We can see it right here. That's a pretty decent gap there.
Yeah. And we can sort of bring this back to how NASA does things because we are going to see it maybe very soon in like 18 days when SLS is ready to go. And I'll use SLS because it's another element of the Artemis program, like the Starship is. NASA's going to do an intense walk down of that launch pad looking for any little things called foreign object debris, which is basically just a terminology that means it shouldn't be there. And these can be things like screws, pieces of rocks, anything that could potentially go airborne as the vehicle starts to ignite its engines and all of those dynamics are in play. It also would not surprise me if, SpaceX had similar procedures maybe for the first couple of launches until they really get a lot of good data on that. Remove the possible things that could do damage to you. And if it's just sand, it's just sand.
Mm-hmm. I would also, the biggest, to close out this question, the biggest connection that I would make is that the pad design for Starship and Super Heavy is somewhat similar to the Soyuz launch pad design, where instead of really making a flame trench per se, they kind of position the launch pad on the side of a hill, and there's just a big open space beneath,
True.
which I guess you could call a flame trench, but it's a similar thing. If you just separate the bottom of the rocket where the launch mount is from the ground enough, you don't need to dig a trench where you can just kind of let the exhaust dissipate over a wider area, which I think is more or less the strategy with the super heavy pad.
Good point with the Soyuz, yeah.
Yeah. And so, to reiterate, as back, so that's the flame trench part of that comment. The other part, again, if you want to check in on Ship 24, go check out the Starbase live feed. We will show that on the commentator feed if that's what becomes active. There's a quick shot of it there, but you can see nothing really going on with the ship right now, although that could change later. We're going to be focusing on the booster because that is what appears to be spooling up for active testing first. All right, a couple other super chats that have come through here. Iron Kerman says, sorry for this, but it's bacon time. There we go. Appreciate the support. Let's see. Corey says, another static fire on the way. So turbo pumped. Haha, I get it, because rocket propellants.
Corey, you are our kind of humor.
And Austin with a question. First of all, says thanks for everything you guys do. We appreciate that, Austin. Enjoy the coverage. How excited are you guys to finally be seeing intentional flames under the orbital launch mount? That was a big milestone for the first static fire of the booster on the orbital launch mount. And hoping to see more than one engine now, hopefully maybe even today. Let's see. Jason is asking, any reason they are testing the outer 20 engines first? Huh. To preface this, we do know that obviously the bottom of the booster would very likely have been damaged from the spin prime anomaly a while ago, and so we saw them removing a lot of engines and moving engines around after that. Maybe I don't know. Do we have any reason why they would go with the outer 20 engines first rather than the inner 13 engines first or something like that?
Honestly, no. I mean, the only difference I can think of is that the outer ones don't gimbal.
Right.
So maybe they just put them in first. But of course, without knowing why they didn't do it, it's kind of hard to. I love the question. It's just kind of hard to answer in a way. They might have just been easier to put back in. Because there are no pistons, so there's no actuation movement to them. I mean, that could potentially indicate that maybe the ones that do have to move had a bit more inspections that were needed in order to clear the booster. So in order to save time, they just didn't put the engines back in because they didn't need them right now. So send it out to put it through some more testing, and then when we're done with that, stick the engines in. I mean, SpaceX doesn't just do things for the heck of it, so there had to be some logical or engineering driven reason why those 13 weren't put back in. And sometimes the simplest answer with SpaceX is the one that's real for them. I mean, they might just be that they just had to make a decision, so they just flipped a coin. I mean, that it could also be that. It's kind of hard to say without knowing from Elon or from SpaceX why they didn't put them all in.
Right, there we go. I would like to tie this in with another question that we got. Holland asking, is it possible because there's no payload on the ship that they could launch with only 20 engines installed? Here's a couple things to consider with that question. First of all, obviously, the obvious thing is thrust level. Like, do you only need 20 engines worth of thrust? Which I would speculate you still need more than that. But here's the other thing to consider. The outer 20 engines do not gimbal. So if you launched with only the 20 engines installed, you would have no steering authority on your stack at liftoff. So the bigger issue is that the inner 13 engines are the ones that are hooked up to gimbal and can actually steer your booster during the first phase of flight. So no, that regardless of thrust level requirements, that is not possible because you won't have any steering authority.
I think we are also, if I look at like just the weight that we about to expect of propellant mass, it might just be like we are all, even if you remove like 50 to 100 tons, as that is probably the payload that we are, the payload capacity of this, like that ship will weigh a lot more with that propellant. So yes, you're removing the payload, that is a significant chunk of weight, but it's in comparison to the whole ship, it's still a lot that you need to lift this. You could probably remove some engines, but not 13 probably.
Yeah. And you know, when we talk about achieving orbit with this, right? The payload, the sort of payload, yes, the payload mass of a Starship is incredible, right, in terms of its payload capacity. But the way the system is overall designed is still very, very similar, right, to other rockets, in that, yes, it can get up to 100 metric tons to orbit, but what does that mean in terms of the number of engines that the booster needs and that the ship needs? I mean, yes, it does technically by the math change the calculus, but it doesn't really for the overall system, because you still want things like redundancy in your system, right? You still want the ability to lose an engine or two or three on the climb uphill and make it, right? That's sort of a huge part of how the Falcon 9s and, and the Starships can build themselves, is that they have that sort of redundancy built in. So I like the question. It's not really as clear cut as, if they don't put a payload in, can they just start removing engines? The system isn't really designed to fly that way to begin with, is really the answer to that, I think.
And it's just like how on all orbital launches, if the payload is particularly light and going to a nice low orbit, and you have really healthy performance margins, you don't underfuel the rocket because, you don't need the fuel. Because if something goes wrong during ascent, you will need that extra fuel to make up for the performance loss. Same reason. You don't want to inhibit the performance of your vehicle just because you have really big margins, because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I would encourage people to, KSP is a good way to do this. But like, when we talk about a rocket making orbit, that literally happens in the final couple of seconds of powered flight. I mean, the perigee is negative until like 4 seconds before engine cutoff on a lot of rockets, and is still technically within the atmosphere, like with 3 seconds left to go in powered flight. It really is like the entire oomph of the rocket that gets you into that initial orbit.
Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong here. Also, some rockets are just designed to operate at a certain tank pressure with certain conditions met.
Yeah.
It's not always easy to just underfuel your rocket and still have the same conditions met that you need for this rocket to perform.
Well, and actually, a lot of the ways that we know a rocket, how much fuel is actually in a rocket, is because, boop, it's full. It told us it was full, so therefore we know how much is in there, because it's not like a gas gauge or a gas tank in your car, right, where you have an idea of, oh, I'm 3/4 full, I'm 4/5 full. It's really not that. It's, did the engine cutoff sensors at the bottom go wet? Good, we've got fuel in there. Did the ones at the top indicate wet? Good, we're full. That's kind of it.
Sure. As a wise person once said, if you get to low Earth orbit, you're halfway to everywhere else. That's how much energy it takes just to get there. All right, I'm going to keep it. We got a whole bunch of super chats here. I want to thank all of these people. Stefan says, greets from Germany. Hope something's happening soon. I have to get up early tomorrow. I hope so too. Look, we're keeping an eye out for some active spooling closer and closer to the vehicle. The question is, have they installed all the Raptors today? And we kind of touched on that earlier. Right now, only 20 engines on the outside ring of the booster are installed. We have not seen them install any engines on the interior 13 yet. So not happened yet. Good Gremlin asking, if they do a spin prime and static fire of every engine, they will fall way behind on the launch schedule if they still want to do it in a month. I think an orbital launch in a month is a optimistic time frame that is not going to be met. So
it's a nice way to put it.
Here's the thing, that the launch schedule will be determined by the testing schedule, not the other way around. The testing schedule has to happen bit by bit. They have to get through the different systems and making sure that they're all operating reliably before they set a launch date. You don't set a launch date before you have completed the testing on a developmental vehicle. So right now, SpaceX is going to be focused on today's static fire testing. And then after that, they'll say, okay, what do we have to do next? And eventually, the next step will be orbital launch, and then we'll know an orbital launch date. But until then, they're going to be focusing on getting these tests knocked out, because that's the progress that they can make today. Brian, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. We appreciate that. Again, the membership program is a great way to support what we do and get you a lot of really cool perks, so definitely check that out if you're interested, and thank you, Brian. Also, Shannon Strutz has become a PadRat member as well, so appreciate that. Here is a question, and it's directed to Chris, so Chris, you get to answer this one first.
Okay.
Because maybe this was related to Artemis Day. They were wondering if anyone at NASA has said anything about how lunar rovers could be deployed to the surface of the moon from the Starship landing system.
Okay, so at the specific day, no one specifically referenced that, but we do actually know the answer to it. So Starship will have an elevator like device on it, right? That will open from the cargo bay, be deployed from it, and then that's how they sort of plan based on the last renders and the last updates that we've seen. That's and to be fair, they're testing it too. We've seen some pictures of them testing it. So that's how they plan to transfer a lot of the crew and the cargo down to the lunar surface. So it is a bit different from how we've previously landed stuff on the moon and Mars. But basically, Starship lands vertically, and then this little cargo hatch opens, and you can put the elevator outside of it, and then that elevator is what gets you up and down to the lunar surface. That's how they'll do it.
There you go.
There's this great meme video that somebody made where the elevator is just going down very slowly because Starship is very big and you hear like cliche elevator music. And I love that.
You know?
It's like going forever because obviously the elevator would be very slow and Starship is very big.
That's funny. Seeing a couple of messages in chat asking about if it could be the reason they test the 20 engines first is because they are connected to orbital launch mount equipment for startup, which is definitely possible. And obviously, by testing those engines, they're also testing the mount in that way. Would also just want to point out that the first time they rolled out this vehicle, it had all 33 engines. So I think at least part of the reason there's only 20 engines installed right now is because they didn't have the time or resources to install the other 13 yet. But it would make sense why they prioritize the outer 20 because they want to test them out. Adrian, did you have something?
Yeah, I think I want to point out something in the recondenser area of the orbital tank farm, which is on the left side of these big tanks you see on the right side. There's on the very left tank in front of that, you see the recondenser area. You see these two tanks and then a vertical black pipe. And on the left tank of that, with I think stores the gaseous methane, if I recall correctly. Yeah, you can see it right there.
Oh, and it's venting right now.
Starts puffing. We saw that puffing behavior last time in the countdown as well. And something that was interesting about the last countdown we saw with the booster is the main pipe of the recondenser never really spooled up. So that was all we saw from the recondenser during the countdown. After the countdown, it completely started. So that's at least interesting to see. I don't have any timing implications for this, but it's interesting to see that the methane side of the tank farm is maybe waking up here.
Yeah, there's another sign that equipment is starting to come to life in preparation for fueling, basically. All right, keep an eye on that. We've got actually another question about the tank farm, so we should just dive into this while it's relevant. Someone is asking what the capacity of the orbital tank farm is. Do we know like how many fueling cycles it can support before they need to refill the tank farm tanks?
I don't.
Hey, Chad, if someone has done the math...
I do not either, yeah. Great question, haven't stopped.
Maybe we'll circle back to this. I don't think I know off the top of my head for sure, but maybe someone in our back channel knows the math of what the capacity of those tanks are.
Someone's typing, so we'll see if we get the answer.
Yeah, we'll see if we get an answer. We'll come back to that. I'll bring in some other questions here. What are the chances that Booster 7 will not be used for the orbital test flight?
What are the chances that Booster 7 will not be used for the orbital test flight?
Yeah, I guess the chances that they move on to a different booster before the orbital flight takes place. This is basically a pure speculation question, but go for it.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I'd say they'd have to find something in testing that ruled out from a flight safety perspective using Booster 7, or it doesn't survive one of its test campaigns. And we definitely hope it's not the latter on that one. But I mean, at this point, for Booster 7 not to be used for Orbital, I would have to say they'd have to find something in testing that disqualified it from a safety perspective.
I feel like at this point, Booster 7 showed its refusal to not be used as the orbital booster.
Yeah.
The fact that it
And
detonated below and then came back, yeah.
like 3 weeks later, yes. It basically was like, hey, did I miss anything? And jumped back on the orbital pad. And yeah, I think it could still be the case that with these multi-engine static fires, there is an increased risk for a booster, and that there something comes up that will basically disqualify it going forward. But I think like if it passes these static fires, that's the one where I'm really worried about. Then I'm quite confident they will fly it. But I agree kind of with Chris here that it would only be like a test failure or something that that basically disqualifies it. It would not be that they just decide to move on at this point. They're too far in the campaign to do that now.
All right, gotcha. We had a question here from Mark asking, did a Saturn V ever do a static fire on the pad? I know
Not on Pad 39A,
yeah,
but on test stands in Huntsville and Stennis, they did. Yes.
and that was like just the first stage basically on itself, right?
First stage, they static fired the stages. The stages, yes,
Mhm.
but they were not integrated together.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. There you go. James says, should we call it 24/7 once it's stacked? I say so, yeah. Appreciate the super chat support there. Simon with a question, why do we think that SpaceX has skipped the pre-burner tests? They did it with Raptor 1 engines, why not with Raptor 2?
I'm gonna go with engine development. Honestly, the reason they might have skipped them is because we heard that one of the goals of Raptor 2 was to make it a lot simpler than Raptor 1. I mean, when you look at the outside of it, it's certainly simpler. So it might just be that part of that process just eliminates the requirement to do a pre-burner. Could also be that as they got more comfortable with the engines, one of the ways we were answering, one of the questions we were answering earlier sort of got to this of how your procedures can change as you get more data with the hardware that you're using. So could also be possible that after all of those pre-burner campaigns with the Raptor 1 engines, they were able to design the Raptor 2s to not need that and be able to eliminate that and move on to another step in that way.
There you go. Good question there. Let me see what else is going on here. Oh, here we go. Aaron with a $20 super chat. Thank you very much. It says, do we think that the overpressure notice could be a sign that this could be a several engines / bigger test, considering they just basically did a verbal warning for the single engine test? Thanks for all you do. I don't know. Do we think that, or is it just a matter of logistics with regards to the notice?
Hard to say either way. It very well could have just been a logistics point. The previous day they might have had it in their like plan for the day, like, hey, if all of these things go well, then we'll do a static fire, and those things did go really well, so then they just went to the village and verbally notified everyone that it was going to happen, right? Versus today, the outright plan is to just proceed into a static fire. It appears based on the notice. It could really have just been as simple as that. Hard to answer based on a very dynamic test campaign that we are observing. I mean, poor Adrian and his spreadsheets, right?
All right, let me see. Stumpy Fingers with another super chat, no message, but thank you so much for the support there. John Michael says, thank you all for the coverage. We appreciate that. Thank you so much. Let's see. Kevin, there are many questions here on engine testing, but it does seem more likely that current static fire tests are testing stage 0 integration. No, I think it's both. I think when they are doing these engine tests, they are not just testing the engines. Obviously, if they were just testing the engines, you would be equivalent to the McGregor testing that they already do. So when they integrate it on a vehicle and then the vehicle is at the orbital launch mount, you're testing all of the systems together. You're testing the vehicle, plumbing and tanks, you're testing the engines, you're testing the ground support equipment, including the launch mount, things like that. All of those things have to work together for these tests. So the answer is all of the above, basically. And James with another super chat saying, another day, another test, another waiting for pad to clear. Thank you for the super chat support there. I do want to reiterate that we do believe the pad is currently clear. We did just see another vehicle kind of come back from the pad to the checkpoint. It appears that the pad is clear now. We did originally report that we believed the pad was clear, but it looked like there might have been one vehicle left. We currently believe that the pad is clear, though, so hence we reply why we are live, because we believe testing could spool up very, very quickly here. In fact, of course, we're already seeing some ground lines chill and things like that. So we'll keep you updated in case that changes, but we do believe that the pad is clear right now. So good news, James. Pad should be clear.
Maybe to add to that, it seems like they cleared the orbital pad early, but when the vehicle came from the suborbital pad, so maybe there was some work to be done there, but they cleared the orbital pad earlier. It seems to maybe start a bit earlier with the tank farm, but now it seems like both pads are cleared.
There you go.
Which would make some sense because I just wanted to clarify, and that would make sense that you might still have someone at the suborbital but not the orbital, because until you really get into like propellant flow operations, things are relatively still stable, right? I mean, you don't necessarily want people right there, which is why they cleared orbital. But over at suborbital, until you start pressurizing things and until you start flowing commodities like this, you can. It's not what we're used to, but it's not necessarily wrong. Let me put it that way.
Well, I mean, we can certainly point to some other space programs where you have people out at the pad at like T-minus 10 minutes in Baikonur, for example.
Yes.
But that makes sense though. At some point, if you crew rate a rocket, well then yeah, in theory you should be able to stand next to it right before launch. It'd be fine because it's supposed to be safe for humans. So
I don't
at some point,
I don't know right by it, but I mean the engines might do some damage to you at that point. But
well, right, I leaving before engine ignition for sure.
Yeah, there are some worrying recordings from China sometimes with people recording launches way too close to the pads.
Yeah, and we don't recommend that even over there. Yeah.
No. Don't go near to rockets during liftoff. It's bad.
Thomas, I actually have a question that came in through text message to me from someone who is watching us and had a question for you and I.
All right. Sorry, Agent.
Yeah. So the question is, a little while back, we said that perigee is negative until the final few seconds of like the upper stage that gets you into orbit, that burn. Can we explain that from like a fundamental physics level? Why is the perigee negative until those final few seconds?
Absolutely. Okay. Orbital mechanics is my thing. So, first of all, vocabulary terms. So when you're talking about an Earth orbit specifically, the highest point in that orbit is called apogee. The more general term is apoapsis, but with regards to Earth, it's called apogee. Same thing for the lowest point, which is periapsis, but more specifically perigee. They're synonymous when you're talking about an Earth orbit. So you have your highest point apogee, which if you're just sitting on the surface on the launch mount, for example, your apogee is your current altitude, which if you measure from the launch mount is 0, or you can measure it from, if you're 30 feet off the ground or something like that, wherever you're measuring it from, but it's effectively 0. And then your perigee is going to be basically the center of the Earth, because when you are orbiting the Earth's center of mass, technically. But you measure it from Earth's surface. Usually you measure it from sea level on Earth. So your perigee is a very, very big negative number. It's negative the radius of the Earth, which is about 6,000 kilometers or so. And so that's your orbital parameters when you're sitting on the launch mount. And once you start to climb and accelerate, you can start to gain the horizontal velocity needed to start achieving orbit. And at any point in that orbit, you can calculate, well, if the Earth's surface didn't actually exist and there was just a point mass at the center of the Earth with the same gravitational pull as Earth, what trajectory would your thing in orbit follow, and how close would you get to that center of the Earth? And if you measure that relative to where Earth's sea level is, you would get some negative number. But as you go faster and faster, that negative number starts to become less and less negative. It starts to go to zero. At some point, very, very late in the last few seconds of launching towards orbit, the lowest point on that theoretical trajectory actually reaches sea level. And basically, if the atmosphere didn't exist, in orbit, you would come down and skim the Earth's surface at that velocity. Give it a couple more seconds, and that lowest point in the orbit will now be above Earth's atmosphere, and then you're in a stable orbit, where you can actually pass through in real life without removing an atmosphere, removing the surface. That orbital trajectory would be stable, and you could at least complete one full orbit around the Earth. So it's like a theoretical calculation of how close you are to actually achieving an orbit. Obviously, once you're in orbit, both your apogee and your perigee will be positive numbers, and will also be greater than usually at least 200 kilometers is considered like a stable orbit. Depends on what exactly your spacecraft looks like. Yeah, your perigee starts off with a really big negative number and gradually gets higher and higher until eventually it's in the sort of hundreds of kilometers range for a low Earth orbit. Hope that answers the question.
It absolutely did.
All right, cool. All right, let me see what else. We got a whole bunch of messages there, so I'm gonna keep going through these. Let's see. Paul with a bit of a comment here. I have hands-on familiarity with the type of hoist motor lifting the platform under the orbital launch mount. We're talking about that Raptor maintenance or install platform that we were talking about. The ways that they can actually access and install engines at the orbital launch site. Paul says that they're 1.5 ton minimum, most likely 2 ton, max 3 ton lift capacity. And he counts 8 times or so of those hoist motors. So he's saying that they could lift groups of Raptors, like lifting groups of Raptors at once would be very doable. Appreciate the insight there, Paul. That definitely feeds into they could be installing engines at the orbital launch site rather than moving the booster back to the production site. So there you go. Appreciate that. Here is a $20 super chat from PetMets who says, will there be a green run similar to what was done with the SLS core stage? In other words, will there be a full duration burn of the engines to simulate the actual duration they would run when launched? Would we claim that?
No.
No.
I think it's an emphatic no from all three of us on that one, but we'll explain why. Yeah. That is not really what this site. So two different things. The Stennis Space Center is flat out designed for that type of testing, right? Everything there is thermally built and conditioned and has all of the water flow systems in place to support 8-minute long full duration green runs like we saw with SLS. So one thing to remember with that one is when SLS was doing that, a very critical component for firing those 4 engines for the full duration was not just their operational effectiveness, right, and making sure they were healthy as they were firing. It was the water flow across the stand for acoustic as well as thermal protection at that point. The water at Stennis was used for both of those things, and you saw it start to flow really, really early before the engine started firing. And if that water flow had been interrupted for any reason, it would have automatically cut off the count because you would start violating thermal limits and acoustic limits instantly. So the stands at Stennis are built for something like that. The stand here at the orbital launch site, just like 39A and Slick 40 are designed and can support short duration hold down static fires because they have to be able to channel that energy during an actual engine start and liftoff, but you never do a full duration on them because they're not designed to do that. And that's very much the same way the orbital launch mount is designed. It's not designed for a full. And I think for Starship, it's like 3 minutes and 12 seconds or something like that is the burn time on the first stage per a Dear Moon thing that we saw. It's up there. It's a pretty significant burn time. So no, for that reason, I absolutely do not expect a full duration hold down static fire here.
And just because it's also maybe a factor here, the core stage, while being very massive, is not providing the big amount of thrust at liftoff. That's the SRBs, right? So while SLS core stage is powerful, the booster here has 8 times the thrust of the core stage of SLF.
Yeah.
So I think it would be a pretty big challenge to buy a stand that survives this for 180 seconds.
Yeah, I guess a good way of sort of relating that too is like the core stage engines with the twin solid rocket boosters are producing a combined total of 8.8 million pounds of thrust at the moment of liftoff for SLS. Remove those 2 solid rocket boosters and you're down to maybe 2 million pounds of thrust out of those engines, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. Static firing full duration would basically for Starship would basically be the equivalent of 4 SLS solid rocket boosters and 8 RS-25s firing continuously into your pad. That's basically what the equivalent would be.
Right. Yeah, thank you so much for the question there, Pemet. Keeping going here. Andrew with the super chat who says, "Oh God, could you imagine Starship elevator small talk? Hey, did you hear they finally replaced those Raptor 2s?" Appreciate the support there, Andrew.
At least the views would be awesome.
That's true, especially if you're like on the moon, you know.
Yeah. Oh. Actually, can we talk about something real quick with that? Someone did ask a question about the Artemis Day thing, and that brought up a point, but I don't want to completely derail us.
No, you're good. Go for it.
So one of the ways that Artemis astronauts who will fly the Starship human lunar landing system are training for the lunar excursions now is use of virtual reality. And they were telling us on the day that, they've been absolutely amazed, NASA has, absolutely amazed at how like one virtual reality session can take the place of dozens upon dozens of planning and strategy meetings because it just puts you in that environment immediately and you can see it. And I actually got the chance, Nick and I actually got the chance to do this at the Artemis Day event and use those same simulators. And oh my gosh, it is exactly as they describe it. So like the views that they will see, we got to experience like as you're coming down on the lander, as you're doing all these different things on the surface. When you see clips of and NASA and SpaceX sort of highlighting virtual reality being used for spacewalk training, lunar training, mission training, it really is a game changer. It's almost indescribable, like the way that you could hear them talk about like, oh, the shadows on the moon don't work the way they do on Earth because Earth has an atmosphere and that creates a gradient effect on the shadow, right? So nothing is ever shadowed into complete darkness, where on the moon, that's exactly what it is. And you can literally be looking at a rock going, wow, it's white on one side where the sun is hitting it, and I cannot tell if that is a bottomless abyss or a shadow on its other side. It is mind-boggling, but that use of VR really, really is going to be massively beneficial to all of the astronauts who train to go to the moon in terms of being ready for what that is actually going to look like. It's incredible. And just wanted to say that since we mentioned a view there.
Was the VR that you did, was it specific to Starship? Like, was it Starship landing system?
No, it was a generic lander, so it was.
Okay.
It looked like none of the ones that are a possibility.
Okay. Figured.
Yeah, but then as they get chosen for specific missions, they do have all of those programs there for the very specific craft. But for us, it was the generic government lander is basically what they
the one that's
called
been
it
in
all
every
day.
render ever, and they haven't updated yet.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love how in these charts that still use that render, you're always like, yeah, that's not how small it will be, but it's always funny to see this render and then imagine what will really be there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, that is slightly connected. I know it's not connected to the exact testing we're doing today, but since Starship is our lunar lander for the first flight of the Artemis program, just wanted to share that part of the of where we're going on. But Thomas and Adrian, where are we right now in our testing schedule?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but periodically I want to give an update as to where we are in the testing. Right now, obviously, you can see a lot of vapors near the orbital launch mount. Those are those ground lines. That's not really tied to any specific timing as to when a countdown may occur or something like that, but it is a sign that they are preparing for testing near the orbital launch site. We also noticed that there was some puffs from near the methane recondenser, so that was a sign that that system was starting to come to life. And it looks like the liquid oxygen subcooler is spooling up. Is that what we see to the right of the main orbital tank farm tanks, right?
That is correct.
So that's another sign that basically what we're seeing now is the different systems with regards to the tank farm and propellant loading are spooling up and beginning to become active. Also, from this view, we do want to clarify the vapors that look like they're kind of coming from the booster is actually coming from the tank farm. There's the big vent that's behind the booster from that perspective, in front of the booster from this perspective now. So we're seeing some vapors from there. The booster is not venting yet. But because of all that tank farm activity, we know that they are spooling up towards propellant loading, and once that propellant loading is underway, we'll have more indications closer to the vehicle itself. So we're going to keep an eye on that. We'll call it out as soon as we see it, of course.
I can maybe also give an outlook like what the next step would be we
Yeah.
would expect. If we could go to that close-up camera for a moment, that would be perfect. Because if you look through the legs here of the orbital launch mount, you see one horizontal pipe on the opposite side of the pad, basically. That is where a pad vent will start at some point. We have not 100% be able to confirm what this vent exactly is. The most likely explanation is that it's some sort of line purge that just ends there, and that usually happens before propellant loading. So that would be the next vent we are looking for. It will start basically through these orbital launch mount legs at the horizontal pipe you see there.
All right, sounds good. And again, whenever we see kind of milestones come up that are significant for the countdown, we will call those out. And I know Adrian is watching closely for spreadsheet data gathering purposes too. Adrian, what is the status of your latest spreadsheet iterations? Are you like at the point where you're like see a milestone and can call out a potential T0, or are you still gathering data on that?
For ship, definitely. For ship, I'm just seeing things and I can call them out. At this point, I feel confident with ship because it looks like they're still going with. There's the pet vent, by the way.
Oh, yep, right there you go.
Here we go.
All right, so what does
yeah.
that mean, Adrian? Do the translation. Translate vent to English, please.
Yes, vent to English. Let's go. There's not I'm still hesitant to put a fixed timing on this because we had so far. So we saw, as Michael pointed out here, we saw the subcoolers went on just before that. So that's a chain we are probably looking at here. It took some significant time from here to T0 the last few times. It took about 2-ish hours, but that doesn't mean it could be faster because we have seen them getting faster in countdown flows before, significantly faster. And so I would not say it's a 2-hour indicator at this point. I would just say that is what we so far saw with this event, and only time will tell if that is really the timing indicator here. It could also be that we are looking at, I don't know, 45 minutes.
All right, so spooling up here again, if you are just tuning in, you can see that vent from underneath the orbital launch mount now, which is a sign that we're getting much, much closer to propellant loading and whatever test they're going to start with on Booster 7 today. Again, the information coming into today's test window is that they put out an overpressure notice, which indicates that they are going to attempt some sort of engine ignition, a static fire of some kind. That, of course, it doesn't specify which vehicle, so we're keeping an eye on both Booster 7 and Ship 24. But right now, you can see the equipment up to the orbital launch mount is the equipment that has spooled up at least spooled up first. So we're expecting Booster 7 to be first up for testing today. Let's see. I'm going to keep some chat messages coming here. Jeremy asked, what is the main obstacle for launch currently? Is it getting Starship ready or completing the action items from the mitigated finding of no significant impact, the environmental assessment?
I would say it's hard for us to tell because it's hard to get an overview about these milestones from the mitigations from the mitigated FONSI, because not all of them are really that public, so we cannot have a good overview there. So we don't really know what's the main obstacle or pacing item right now. What we do know is that even if they would have been done with the mitigate FONSI items, they could not launch right now because both vehicles are still in testing. So I think the only way for us to know at the end is if they are through vehicle testing and still can't launch, and I'm sure we'll get some Elon tweets at that point. Then we know the mitigated FONSI items are the problem. But for now, I would as I don't like that answer, but in the end, it's the answer. We don't really know.
I think overall, I would agree with that. Although I think personally, just based on how the mitigated FONSI was written, I would honestly say when the vehicles are ready, we'll see a liftoff. I don't think it's. I would lean more toward it's the vehicles at this point that are the long pole.
I agree on on my feelings and opinions on that. I totally agree with you there.
I also agree, and so I'll leave it at that. Appreciate that. Isaac with a new Red Team membership. Thank you so much for joining on. Justin Waters with a PadRat membership, so thank you so much. Austin with a Launch Director membership. That is a very, very generous membership, so thank you so much for joining on.
Nice.
Hope you enjoy that. Oh my goodness, another one. BitShifter with a Launch Director membership. Thank you. There's a whole lot of members coming in. I want to thank you and welcome you all to the program.
Thank you so much. I mean, sorry, thank you so much. That type of continued support really does mean a lot to us. It's largely and truly what allows us to be here doing this in the middle of the day, and doing what we absolutely love and sharing our passion with you. So thank you. That really does help us, and it really means a lot. As sometimes as insincere as those thank yous can mean, we really do mean it. Thank you.
For sure. We also had Space Pope, which I can only assume is related to the Pope stack, which is what we've been starting to call that stack behind the booster. But thank you, Space Pope, for gifting 5 Red Team memberships as well. Appreciate that. And John H with a PadRat membership. Oh my goodness, so many. Oh, there's more. I forgot to scroll on my screen. There's also a Capcom membership for Boss. Thank you and appreciate the support there. Oh my goodness.
I believe Capcom, as well as I know our 2 launch directors, but I believe, Thomas, right, that Capcom is the level that if you like all this joking and banter and you want it 24/7 in your life, that's the level that gets you access to our Discord, where all of this fun continues around the clock. And I do mean that all of this fun continues around the clock, where you can share your gaming efforts. Doesn't have to be space gaming at all. It can be any type. You can party chat with us, and
although
and
if cursed KSP rockets is your thing, that definitely happens.
That definitely does happen. Yes.
But yes, Capcom or higher for Discord access for sure.
Yes.
But thank you everyone for all your support.
Yes, and any of the levels of membership and support really do mean a lot to us. So we do thank all of you for that. And plus, you get some really cool members perks too, just by being a channel member, like some early photos, some early clips, some special emoticons, and stuff like that. So it's not just the Discord access, but we do take care of our members quite a bit.
Yes, of course. All right, I'm gonna keep the questions coming here. Shane with a question. Could it be that the inner engines were not installed because of a possible swap from the hydraulic systems to the new I guess it should be electronic. The electric thrust vectoring control actuators, as some result of the previous blast. Would we expect them to make the change by simply changing the engines? Because the booster would have, hydraulics equipment on board, right?
I would think that change would come with a vehicle that is made for that change. Because then you would probably need bigger batteries, right?
Also that, yeah. Really quick, I want to interject because a lot of venting from the orbital launch mount right now.
Wow.
So again, we see the mount venting is spooling up, a sign of propellant loading getting underway here.
I kind of want to
not-
make some type of a joke, like if you like the way Falcon 9 vapes, look at Starship. But you know, but Jack's
yeah.
not here, so I'll wait for Jack to be here to make the vaping.
Yeah,
joke.
okay. But yeah, I would. So my answer to that question would be, it's not as simple as swapping out the engines to change to the new electric actuators. You would need to change the systems on the booster as a whole as well, and so probably not what's going on there. But a good hypothesis. Good thought there.
I also see the recondenser really showing like this puffing activity from time to time again. That's also a good sign, I would say. Also, no timing noted for that, or like fixed timing yet. But we can see it spooling up from time to time and puffing. So I would also call it a very good sign.
Adrian, what visual indicator are you looking for that would actually confirm that propellant loading is underway?
It's really hard with the booster because the booster sometimes is a bit trickier with the indicators as the ship, because with the ship we saw all of these tests. We know a lot about the ship countdown. Compared to that, the booster is kind of funky. One of the indicators we saw is this pad vent stopping, but that also sometimes is not really 100% there. Of course, the big indicators would be a change in color or a change in the structure of the tanks. Because when they load in cold things there, and these are very cold things, you would probably see like some sort of change in that color, and maybe some condensation on the booster tanks. That would be the big indicator I would look for here.
All right, gotcha. Thankfully, with these, what we're expecting a static fire test, we also get that 10-minute warning, the siren before ignition, which is very helpful because for other tests we don't really get that. So we do get a little bit of a kind of semi-official heads up. Hey, we're about to fire an engine, which is useful. But they got a propellant load first.
Also, we have an indicator here with the engine chill vent, which also happens on the booster. It's directed, if you look at the left camera here, it would happen on the facing side to us. There would be a vent there. That also happens in the same range of like 15-ish minutes, what we are looking for in the other countdown. So the engine chill vent is not changed here, and that's also a very solid indicator we are getting close.
There we go. Let's see. Senti with the super chat, no message. Says thanks for the support though. And Brandon, here's a cool message, $25 super chat. So thank you so much. Looking forward to the day we see a NASA worm logo on the side of a Starship as it launches towards the moon to wait for astronauts. Yes, I went there. Hashtag Team Worm.
Yes,
As long as there's also a meatball logo, I will accept that.
Look, I won't disparage Team Meatball, but Worm. No.
Worm.
No, honestly, like, yeah, I really want to see that. I mean, I just in the exact same way, I am really excited to see those bright red worm logos on the sides of the solid rockets when SLS does its roll program and heads off the pad. Yeah, really looking forward to that. I love seeing all the agency logos and all the partner logos on the vehicles as like a celebration of what the teams have done. I really personally like that. I might be in the minority, but I really like that.
Here's another good one from Mr. X who says, here would be a good quote for the first person on Mars. One long elevator ride for a human, but a short elevator ride for humanity.
Now I get images in my head of like this anticlimactic moment of just elevator going down. Like it's first person on Mars, and it's like a slow elevator ride.
At some point there has got to be a comedy series about this. Come on.
Yeah, that would be a good
It's practically writing itself. I mean, come on. All right, let's see. What else do we have here? Jim Cavett, no message, just the super chat support, so we appreciate that. Let's see. Let's see. Just a couple other super chats. DJ Poison says, "You guys rock. Been following these latest tests. Appreciate the support there." Here is a question from Mark asking, "Does the FAA have an inspector on site for all testing at Starbase or only for launches?"
If I remember correctly, it's launches, right? The wording
I
says
think
launches.
that's correct.
Correct, because the FAA does not have jurisdiction over the test campaigns. A statement I believe they had to issue after the Booster 7 anomaly back in July. I believe the FAA did have a response that said, it's the local authorities who coordinate that type of testing, not the FAA.
Gotcha.
Now,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that is correct.
Yeah, no, I mean, maybe there comes a point like if you have to start doing full stack, full fueling testing where there would be airspace closures that would accompany those tests, at which point the FAA would be involved in so much as they would be in charge of restricting the airspace for the particular test.
Sounds good. Keeping some questions coming here. Rough Riders with a question. Would we think that they would test ships and boosters that are assigned to go to Florida and Boca before shipping them there, or wait until they can build those vehicles locally in Florida? What do we think we would expect from the first Florida Starships?
Okay, I'm just rereading the question to make sure I've got it. Would you think they would test ships and boosters that are assigned to go to Florida in Boca before testing them before shipping them there? Okay, so like if I got it. So the question is basically asking, hey, if there are ships and boosters that are being built that we know are going to be scheduled to launch from Florida, would it make more sense to build them and test them in Boca and then ship them to Florida for their launch campaigns? Yeah, I think that's actually potentially what a path forward might be. Not necessarily, but it could definitely be a path where Boca is sort of a main build and test facility, and as it needs to help augment the Florida facility as it's being built, it can do so. I mean, that wouldn't necessarily surprise me, right? I mean, you do to some degree always want to keep in mind that the Starship Florida pad is at 39A. And when I say it's at 39A, I mean it's inside the fence of 39A. It is inside that pad's security perimeter. So, and of course 39A is right now the only pad that can launch humans from the United States. So you do have those sort of things that all need to be thought of and considered. So I could definitely see that being a path forward, but at a certain point, I think the tipping scale becomes when the Florida Starship facilities are actually up and running and can build them and can do all of this themselves. What then becomes the point of incurring the extra cost of shipping them from Boca to Florida when Florida can be building them all right there at their launch site? And then I think that might be where you see Boca and Florida start to become the two Starship launch sites. And then you see Florida get augmented with LC-49 north of the or 48? Yeah, LC-48 north of the LC-39 complex right now.
There we go.
I think that was
Thank
a
you.
far more in-depth answer than you were
I think you
expecting,
answered the
but I'm
question
on stream.
thoroughly. So
Yeah.
appreciated that. That was Chris Gephardt, expert as always. By the way, speaking of experts on the show named Chris, I think we are about to double the amount of shuttle experts on today's stream. Mr. Chris Bergen, managing editor of NASA Spaceflight, do we have you joining the commentary team?
You do indeed. A little bit of an intro there. As an expert, I think my expertise is now completely and utterly overtaken by the likes of Adrian. So you're getting a bit of a downgrade with me.
No, we'll just increase the number of shuttle references. We're all
Fair
good.
enough. Yeah, that'll be all right then.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man. Well, it looks like Adrian is going to actually ghost us for a little bit. Adrian's going to hop off for a bit. By the way, have you seen Ghostbusters, Adrian?
Yeah, thanks for calling me out after that discussion came up in the back channel. No. No, I haven't. And,
Really quick,
yeah,
before you go, I
Adrian,
have
Adrian,
one.
don't feel bad. I've not either.
You haven't seen
Thank you.
Ghostbusters?
I have not.
Oh
No.
man!
So I will
really
stand
quick
with
before
Adrian on that.
before Adrian goes, James Duries wants to know. Okay, Adrian, what have you watched?
Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Stargate.
All right, those are three good ones, but like
Works for me.
we just got to expand the list there. By the way, shout out to Jack Byer in the back channel. I totally just stole that outro from him. But Adrian, sincerely, thank you so much for your commentary so far today. We're going to rotate you out because we do have a long day of testing ahead. But thanks for joining us.
Yeah, might be back later, and enjoy the testing, everybody.
Sounds good. Folks, if you are just joining us, we are standing by for Booster 7 testing. At least that's what it appears that SpaceX is going to be testing first today. You can see some venting from the orbital launch mount, indicating that they're getting ready to load propellants into the vehicle and potentially get towards some more static fire testing today based on the overpressure notice that Mary received. In the meantime, of course, we're taking a lot of questions, so if you've got questions, tag us with @NASA in chat. I'm trying to ask as many of them as I can, but there's so many of them coming in, so I'm doing my best here. We do have a quick question here from David, who says, "Greetings from Orlando. When will the next KSC update video come out?" Soon, TM. I'll leave it at that. I don't know if I'm allowed to say more than that.
Well, I'll tell you what I can actually kind of say, because I've just started. What I was delayed with coming on stream was I was uploading some photographs, which may or may not be related to that. But if you're a Red Team member, you'll see some of them starting to drop now as I start uploading them literally myself. And also Capcom and above. If you Capcom and above, you get into our NSF Discord, which is a member Discord, and there's a channel in there at the top. Some people don't see it. There's a channel at the top called Member Level Photos, and that's where every day I drop whatever complete dump of photographs. In this case, it was like hundreds of photographs into that channel, in where you can literally download them in full res. Don't put them on Twitter or anything like that, but you can download them for your own pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some really cool stuff. I'm actually just scrolling through it since you mentioned it.
There you go. I want to give a big thank you to people who are supporting the stream as well, because we have a whole lot of memberships that have come through once again. Bradford has entered at a PadRat membership, so thank you so much. Smooth with another one, PadRat membership, so thank you. Brett with a PadRat membership, thank you. We also had it looks like Nick has upgraded to our Red Team membership, so thanks for that. Paul becoming a flight engineer, that's a very generous membership level that just goes above and beyond, so appreciate that as well. Also MC with a flight engineer membership, so thank you so much. And then we also had some Capcom memberships, which is that level that from Capcom and above you get the Discord access, so Helix Spiral and Bryology, as well as Don. Thank you all so much for your Capcom memberships, appreciate that, and we hope you enjoy all of the perks. Also, Juiced with a €50 super chat. No message, but we just want to say thank you for that support, Juiced.
Wow.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to dive back into some questions as well. Neil, who is wondering, that scaffolding underneath can't be safe. Surely that's a sign we won't see all the engines fired. What do we think? Could that scaffolding just be sacrificed in the name of engine testing?
You know, can I start off on that? Because it was a question that came up on the stream many weeks ago. And we all thought at the time that was temporary, because they do a lot of work. I've seen in chat people were asking about the amount of work that goes on overnight. It tends to be on the orbital launch mount where they do a lot of welding. You see sparks flying in the night because they show up on the night cameras really well. I personally think that's mainly temporary access, but other people have said no, that's probably permanent. Now we'll know for sure in the future. But personally, I was kind of hoping for some kind of elevator system, because there are two ways of accessing the mount right now are those stairs, which do look quite temporary, and also on the lifts, which they just transport people per time on it. So, yeah, it's an open-ended question, but I personally think it's temporary.
Do you think it would stand in the way of doing any number of engine testing, or because it's temporary, they wouldn't really care?
Well, that's one way to get rid of it if it's temporary. Do a 33 engine static fire test on it. That gets rid of your stairs in no time.
Man, I want to see that on one of those late night infomercials, right? Tired of having to carry everything up to your Starship? It's
Fire up
just a little-
33 Raptor 2s.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree in general with what you said there. Yeah.
Cool. Another question from Paul asking, there was a lot of work on the orbital launch mount overnight with a significant amount of welding. Any idea what they may have been up to?
No, that's what we were just talking about, wasn't it? Yeah, that was what I saw. I happened to see Colin on my eye in chat, where they do tend to be doing a lot of that every single night almost. I think the emphasis has been put on it a lot more recently because of what happened with the spin prime test, and they had that explosion. So they obviously had some work to do to repair the mount, but thankfully that repair work, some people were worried it's going to take a long time. They've obviously completed it in short order to be able to turn around to do this level of testing. We don't know how many engines are going to fire up, but again, it's all progress towards that 33 engine test we're all been looking forward to. So I think whatever Repair's doing now is just final work ahead of that bigger milestone of a full stack 33 engine strike fire.
All right, sounds good. Thanks. Couple some more super chats that have come through here. Kenneth with a $20 super chat and no message, just some support, so appreciate that. And then Bradford with a $5 super chat. Pretty sure that you also joined the membership program earlier, so appreciate that. Ryan also joined the membership program at the red team level, so thank you for that. Let's see here. Again, if you are just tuning in, we are standing by for Booster 7 testing. The ground support equipment has been coming to life, and you can see a lot of venting from the launch mount, so we're getting pretty close here. Next milestone should be seeing some signs of prop load onto the vehicle, so we're keeping an eye out. Could be any minute now. I do want to offer another thank you to everyone who supports the stream, and if you are looking for another way to support the stream, the NASA Spaceflight Store is a great way to help us do what we do and help us keep improving our coverage. We've got the metal prints have been very, very popular, so I'll mention those are really high quality prints of all of your favorite NASA spaceflight photos, from the Starship program to Falcon 9. There's an Atlas V photo in there now. There's an SLS photo in there, from all of your favorite NASA spaceflight photographers. So highly recommend the metal prints. We've even got the unboxing video now of what it looks like when you receive your metal prints of your NASA spaceflight photos. And again, those products go towards improving all of NASA spaceflight's coverage. So all of those proceeds are really, really appreciated. There you go. That's a nice photo. I think that's one of Nick's Starship photos. So
Yeah,
there you go.
yeah. I was
but there you
surprised
go.
because I got some and I was surprised how good the packaging was and also the print themselves. I wouldn't have said that if I didn't think that. I would not put my limited reputation on the line by saying that they are amazing. So I'm going to just put on record, they are amazing.
Also, I believe we've got that tank top that appeared in the store yesterday. I wasn't on air at that point, so I missed that. I just know it appeared on the store at some point, so there's that going on as well.
Oh,
if
it's
that's your
there.
thing.
Yeah. And I mean, that's an actual photo like that one of us got that we overlaid onto it. From what I remember. So yeah.
I'm going to take a picture of myself in the gym with that on. It'll be like a 1 o'clock in the
Please
morning
do.
gym when no one else is around. But
Is that like a members perk? Like
Oh no.
oh no, that's a if you're not a member, you're going to get this video.
The member perk is not having to see that video.
Yes.
All right, we're going to dive back into some questions here while we wait for propellant load to move in. Martin has a question. Do we have any news on the Deimos or Phobos oil rigs being converted for Starship use?
Oh, not recently, actually. I think the focus has kind of shifted to making sure that they're getting the system up and running and tested first. Not least due to their own internal schedules that they would like to meet and customers that they would like and missions they would like to bid for with the system and the Starlink V2 deployments, but for the Artemis program and the lunar lander. So yeah, I would love to know, but we really not heard a lot about those two in a while.
I believe they're both birthed next door to each other now, aren't they? In that port which I can't pronounce.
Pascagoula,
Pascagoula.
Mississippi.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I won't even attempt that. I'll just butcher it. But they're both parked next to each other now, or parked both next to each other now. So there's a good chance that maybe when Elon says, okay, what's the update on our rigs? And SpaceX say, well, it's this, that, and the other, he'll go, right, I want this one ready and that one ready to take its backup place. Because we're not far away from that. Because I just remember that drive down Highway 4 in Tim's first interview videos, where Tim asked him about the rigs, and Elon seemed completely disinterested with the rigs. It's almost like they'd been cancelled. But it's now returned back to being interested in them. So it's one to keep an eye on. But I think they'll probably put a tower on one rig and then leave the other one to spare, ready for whatever they're going to do with it.
I mean, it's probably a lower priority item that will suddenly become high priority when they're ready to go, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Some other chat messages in here to talk about. Chad says wormball. All right, we're back to the NASA logo conversation. So I feel like people on both sides of the meatball versus worm debate just go, ew, wormball, that's not allowed. Appreciate the super chat there, support there. Stan has a question. Any update on the chopsticks? We know that it appeared that they might have been affected by that anomaly during the spin prime test a while ago. Have we seen, what's the latest work we've seen them do on the chopstick arms?
We have seen them being raised and lowered, so they're obviously working on their pulley system. We haven't seen them being mated to grabbing hold of a booster yet, which was boost 7, because that's why it was replaced onto the RML with the crane while they were repairing the chopsticks. I personally think, because we've not seen much work on them since, that they are probably now repaired. The next probably test of them will be, where they're in an operational mode, is to remove booster 7 from the orbital launch mount. So it's one to check, really. But I think, personally, from the lack of work done since and the fact they've been going up and down recently, they've repaired whatever hydraulic leak they had with it.
Yeah. Keeping the questions bacon, but appreciate the support there. We'll have to get Jack's opinion on that later.
I feel like at one point I'm gonna have to have like a bacon themed meal that I eat while we commentate. Like, you know, I feel like that's the next step where this is going.
Michael upgraded their membership to launch director, so thank you so much for your very generous support there. Oh my goodness, we're getting a lot of support today. I want to balance this with asking questions, so I'm trying to answer as many questions as we have, but also want to just thank everyone who's sending their support our way. We really do appreciate it. Craig with a question, do we think that they will start to build the booster from a lighter material in the future, since it won't have to withstand the same heating that Starship does during re-entry? So maybe going to something other than stainless steel because it doesn't have the same thermal requirements?
So I see where our question's coming from, yeah, because it's a question, right, that's asking about like optimizing the booster for what the booster needs to be able to handle. You know, I think I'll answer this a couple of different ways. One, making both components out of the same material, same diameter, same tank components really streamlines your process. As soon as you alter that for the booster, it basically means that every new ship you build costs more and every new booster you build costs more, because now you have to maintain two separate production processes, two separate lines, two separate manufacturing guidelines. You now have to have two of everything, where as here you just have one. And you know, you get a booster, you get a ship, and then the ships need the thermal tiles to survive atmospheric reentry, whereas the boosters don't need thermal protection coating because of the material that they are made out of. It doesn't come close, you know, the melting point of that does not come close to the temperatures that they will experience as they come back into the atmosphere. So I get what you're saying, because that's ultimately, right, what we ultimately think in rocketry is, how do we make everything simpler? But sometimes it's not. Sometimes making it simpler is keeping it the same, because of how it simplifies the overall system.
Also, can I just add on the stainless steel side? We know they've gone from different alloys. They've gone from 301 to 304.
Right.
And obviously, I remember Elon talking about a 30X alloy I don't know where we are along on that path, but obviously he's thinking of an evolution of the actual stainless steel side of things. So there's a prospect of maybe a change coming in the long-term future, because everything we're doing right now is just testing. It's testing the vehicle. He wants a goal of getting this thing orbital, and then he'll be launching Starlinks, and that'll be its initial operational phase, which will still be a testing phase as well. And then there'll be people at SpaceX, and including himself, who'll be thinking way down the line in years to come with the big goal of creating a city on Mars, where he needs lots and lots and lots and lots of these vehicles launching a lot of up mass, and that's where we may see the evolution over time.
There we go. Thank you for the question there. Appreciate that. Elmar with the €10 super chat. Thank you so much. Juke says we need an NSF movie night. I'm assuming that's for Adrian's benefit.
Yeah, it's for Adrian.
Guess we'll have to get on that. And Rocketeer with a Capcom membership. Appreciate that as well. Here is another discussion question here from Mechazilla itself, who asks, who thinks I'm gonna nail this catch first try, and keep up the good work, guys. Love the coverage. Appreciate that. I don't know, first catch attempt. What do we think?
Ah,
Tell you what, Chris,
Not
you
a
know-
lot
you
of
know- you know-
optimism in that first couple seconds.
No, you know
Yeah.
what? You ever think, Chris? I think my trepidation about that is I think the best way, and I'm not Elon, I wish I was, but I'm not SpaceX or anything like that. I just think that the way they proved their technology with Falcon 9, where they did water landings to start with, so they could learn from the accuracy of how they could bring the booster back to a targeted landing. I think that just makes so much more sense for the first boosters before they attempt to bring you back to the chopsticks and potentially risk things like the tank farm. I'm sure the tower would probably be okay, because there won't be a lot of fuel left on the vehicle. So if it did go crashing into something, the tower would probably keep standing. But I always have concerns about the tank farm, and that's a lot of things to replace there. So I'm sure, even though we may see from time to time people saying, oh, they're going to go for the catch in the first attempt, I personally think they'll go for a water landing as originally planned, and just see how accurate it is. Again, with the caveat that they may lose this vehicle halfway through a percent. It's a test vehicle. It's going to have issues. If they get to the point where they're bringing the booster back, even if it's over water, that's already a win, because that means they've got through staging and they've got through a return, and the thing's still intact. It'd be an amazing achievement to get that far. So a catch, that's really jumping the gun a little bit as far as I'm concerned. I would like to think they maybe give it a few goes before they do try and attempt to catch.
yeah. I'm very much with you in that I am fascinated, and I use that word the same way Spock uses it in all of its iterations, into the desire to try and catch it on the first attempt, because I'm with you. A water landing makes a lot more sense to me. And I've even wondered, and of course I say this speculatively because I do not know what the communication range is. I don't know exactly how they're communicating with one another, but like I would imagine part of how this works is that the booster knows where it is, so it's talking to the ground, saying, "Here I am." The arms have some sort of sensing system in them too, or are looped into that communication network, right, to know when all of that sequencing starts to start the closing procedure on the arm when the booster is hovering. And I know a big part of this is we're not used to boosters and rockets just hovering in midair, but we've got to start to get used to that, because this is what it is. And how they're going to basically catch it is it's going to hover, and then the arms come in and close. And all of that looped in with very little propellant left. The risk is probably not as great as we're making out, but it's not non-existent. And I really do wonder, like, what if you were just trying to land this thing a kilometer offshore, and that way it's still talking to the tower? You can go through all of those routines and all of those movements to make sure that it's working properly, and that the communication lines are working for how they have to talk to one another. I admit that's what I thought they would do, and that's not what they seem to be wanting to at this point. So I admit at that point I'm nervous about them trying to catch this on the first attempt, because yeah, the tower might be there, maybe the orbital farm is still there, but that orbital launch mount makes me real nervous, because as far as we know, there's no spare that we're seeing.
But I mean, plenty of reason to think that they're gonna valid, and there's also the idea we kind of touched on this with regards to like static fire testing, where
Yeah.
every test flight is a catch attempt until something doesn't go
Also
right before
true.
then. And so you can get to let's say you get to stage separation and everything's working perfectly. Cool. The next thing the booster will try to do is do a boost back burn. And if something happens during the boost back burn, you just stop there and you splash down off the coast and you don't try to catch. But if you do the boost back burn successfully and everything's going well, then the booster will come back in through reentry and it'll start steering towards the catch tower. And again, if anything goes wrong, they can abort to off the coast. And so there's plenty of opportunities where the booster will just check itself whether everything is going well. And that should, if they go through that kind of procedure, that would help mitigate any risk to the catch tower, because you would have all that data that says, okay, everything's working well so far. The next bit of progress you can make is try to catch it. So, and you won't really be able to say, yeah, we can catch a booster until you try it, right? So.
Indeed, and in total fairness too, I mean, we have seen the immense precision at which they nail the Falcon 9 landings, to the center of the X's on the drone ships and the landing pads. So that is not to say that the software teams, the avionics teams, do not have the experience to pull this off. It's just you don't normally see all of that translate to let's go for gold on number one. I
Right.
think that's the last part is the trepidation, not the wealth of knowledge that they have in how to bring these things back with a lot of precision. Different engines, different system. I will totally note that. It's not the Falcon 9. But, yeah.
A little bit of a breaking news. It's just an update. NASA and Boeing are going to do a teleconference tomorrow at 1 p.m. to provide an update on the agency's Boeing crew flight test CFT to the International Space Station, the first flight with astronauts on the company's CST-100 Starliner spacecraft. Now, my smart money is on maybe a launch date in early 2023 now.
Yeah, early 2023, maybe December of this year? Maybe.
I think they could go with December this year and then just have some natural slips, which will happen anyway.
Right.
And that'll push it to 2023. But yeah, I think it's probably a sign of not far off if they're going to do a media release. Otherwise, they wouldn't really go to the media and say, oh, by the way, we've got some bad news. They'd want to give some positive overviews. So I think they're probably saying that the Orbital Test Flight 2 has passed its reviews and they're going to go forward now with CFT.
Which, based on everything out of the mission, that's almost exactly what I expected.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really quick, we see a big uptick in venting from the launch mount here. Still waiting on signs of actual propellant load on the booster itself, but you can see that the ground equipment is very active, so we should be nearing propellant load for today's static fire testing, and we'll call that out as soon as we see it, but wanted to acknowledge the status of testing right now. We're also continuing to take some questions, and we've got one here from Tony who asked, when do we think we'll see a full HLS prototype? HLS, of course, referring to the Human Landing System, which is the moon landing variant of Starship.
Yeah, I think we're a while away from that kind of like proper mock-up, because we go back to the site of the nose cone, the white nose cone, the NASA worm, by the way, and US flag on the side of it. And that was literally just a nose cone that was painted. There was nothing inside it. We were hoping they were going to do some kind of like a mock-up of what the interior would be like, but it was basically just there for sure because they just won I think they were just in the process of winning the contract. As far as HLS proper goes, I think that'll be down to Roberts Road, mostly because it's going to launch from KSC 39A. So that is still a while away, but again, with the Artemis program, the timeline is quite elevated to the point where they don't really need to rush on this thing, and they shouldn't rush on this thing because it's so important to the overall space program. So maybe we'll see some drawings at least next year from SpaceX if they release them. It depends on what NASA wants to do as far as promoting Artemis, especially after the Artemis 1 mission. Once that's back and in the bag, they'll want to kind of like cover the gap we'll have between Artemis 1 and Artemis 2 with some HLS news, and that's where SpaceX would come in.
Right, you got it. A couple other memberships that have come in here as well. XM with a new launch director membership. Again, that's a really high membership level, so thank you to that. Kit Kat with a Pad Rap membership, thank you so much. Sebastian at Capcom, thank you. And James Clark with the Pad Rap membership, appreciate that. Flawed Perspective says, more throat lozenges to keep all the awesome commentators happy and talking. Thanks. It's going to be another marathon day of testing, so we appreciate that. And Mechazilla with a Flight Engineer membership. Thank you, Mechazilla. Appreciate the support. Nick with a Super Chat question asking, can we go over where all the sound clips from the intro are from? Oh, man.
Oh, we need Jack for that.
There's so many.
I'll tell you what, the Yikes You Bet Concur, people ask where that comes from. That's actually John Shannon, who now works as one of the managers of SLS. He was flight director on STS-93. And the back loop, we've got a video of it in L2. If you remember L2, you'll see it.
Hey, really quick, Chris, I want to interrupt you here because
Yes.
the venting on the orbital launch mount has just stopped, which has previously been an indicator that they're about to start loading propellant load, or start propellant loading, excuse me.
Nice.
So, looks like they're getting into propellant load now. We should start to see signs on the booster itself here shortly. Anyway, continued.
It's every time I mention shuttle, someone says, stop talking. Something's happening with Starship. I'll always hug my shuttle. Yeah, that Yikes You Bet Concur is just from the flight loop with John Shannon and his controllers, where they'd realised that they'd had a problem with one of the engines during ascent on Columbia and they had underspeed. And that's when they realised that one of the nozzles were leaking during ascent. So, yeah, STS-93 was a troublesome launch. And that Yikes You Bet Concur, we don't need any more of these, is what they said right at the end of that video. It was like the internal loop video version of the launch.
Yeah, we'll have to go through. We'll have to do a list of all the different audio clips. So we can go back and do that when I'm not on air hosting a live stream. But we'll get back to that. Appreciate the support there, Nick. Always appreciate it. But yeah, again, so we were looking at that kind of big pipe that's underneath the bottom of the orbital launch mount that was venting for most of the time and has just stopped, which is a sign of getting into propellant loading. And again, booster 7 testing is what we're expecting first here, and we're expecting some sort of static fire testing. We had a lot of questions about what engines might be fired, and that we don't know. But obviously we saw them do a single engine static fire before, so we would either expect them to fire a different engine or maybe multiple engines, something like that. So we'll have to wait and see, but getting closer to static fire operations, and of course the big thing will be that T-10-minute siren that we're so glad to have back as our official heads up of a test firing. In the meantime, still got a bunch of chat messages to go through here. John with some support, appreciate that. Stage Light with a Capcom membership, appreciate that as well. Chris Wilson has a question. Are there plans to enclose the controls on the orbital launch mount? During the unplanned static fire, many panels appeared to be damaged. So we're talking about on the orbital launch mount, that ring near the top of the mount. You can see a lot of exposed systems and things like that. Do we have any official information on if that's going to be closed up in the future and like the orbital launch mount will look different than it does now?
I would say we don't have any information on that. I would just point out that they've had a static fire the other day, so it seems to be okay with the one. It depends. It's probably more of a question for when they do more engines. So we don't really know what their plans are for today. They don't publicize these things just as we don't know the answer to that question. But it's something where they were okay with one engine, and I'm sure they'll be okay with one engine again. But if they go for the 33, then you ask the question, do they really need to cover it or do some more work on there? So it's a wait and see, really, answer to that one.
Yeah, sure. Freaky with a Pad Rap membership, appreciate that. And then Gustavo and Tommy with 2 Capcom memberships, so appreciate that so much. Morph with the question that we touched on a little bit earlier, curious if the clamps would be able to hold back a 33 Raptor 2 engine static fire. And we touched on this earlier. We did some speculation as to what might be required. Things like firing the engines at less than full thrust, or of course having a Starship on top and fully fueling the vehicle to weigh it down. I think our basic conclusion was that we don't know exactly what the launch mount has been designed to withstand. But yeah, I mean, anything to add to that?
No, again, I heard the answer to the previous question earlier in the stream that it really is something where it's not all going to be on the clamps. There's going to be some mass from what we expect to be a full stack with a Starship on top, and that's where they'll be able to keep things in the same place. It doesn't go and accidentally launch itself.
All right.
Yeah. That's the important part in a static fire, right?
Yes.
Right. Here is another question. Is the orbital launch mount supposed to be able to keep a booster in place with all engines firing before the clamps release? It seems less steady than Northrop's Utah test stand where the SLS booster was tested.
Well, the funny thing about the Utah
Oh, hey,
test
hold
stand-
on. Sorry, Chris, I'm
course, of
interrupting you
course.
again.
Of course.
Looks like engine chill is starting. Is
A
there a little
little
bit of
bit,
venting from an engine
yeah.
underneath there?
Yes, there is very clearly. Yep, on the left-hand image.
So, folks, if you're looking at the left-hand camera view, right in the middle of the orbital launch mount, you will see it's kind of stopped right now. It started to get some venting from one of the engines underneath Booster 7, and that indicates that the vehicle is getting prop loaded. There is now enough propellant to begin chilling the engine on the orbital launch mount, and that could give us a test maybe within the next 30 minutes or so. So we're now in the imminent part of testing, and of course we're gonna, well, I guess it's imminent once we get that T-minus 10-minute alarm. But engine chill appears to have just started based on that vent we just saw. Anyway, Chris, sorry, would you like to talk about the orbital launch mount a bit?
I think it's something. There's a shuttle curse going on here because I was going to mention that the NG test site in Utah is a site which they use for the shuttle booster testing. Now I've moved on since with the 5-segment booster testing, and that is literally burrowed into the side of a mountain. It really has got the sturdiness you'll ever want by being literally concreted down and anchored into the side of that mountain for when it fires. And the exhaust area of that mountain is now glass. And that's how much heat is generated by that. 22 million horsepower, they say, during the test firings.
Hey, Chris, it's time for me to interrupt you again.
Go for it.
We have some vents
Oh.
that I don't think we've seen before. Look at the left side of the orbital launch mount.
Yeah, look at that.
That would
those are
probably
new.
be that, but that's got to be related to engine chill, right?
I would very much think so, based on timing. Yes.
I am pretty sure these are some new vents related to engine chill, and this could be, I mean, and that would also coincide with the fact that with static fires, with the static fire testing we would expect today, we'd expect them to be doing either a different engine or multiple engines or something. So it makes sense that venting might be different from the previous test. But yeah, some new visual indicators here as the vehicle gets closer to static fire. Anyway, I'm done interrupting. If you'd like to continue.
Actually, I just finished, so you were okay. I just
All right, there we go.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see, and of course, we'll get the full data point once the actual test happens. What, we can kind of correlate what different vents might mean with the actual test that occurs. But I'm still seeing a little bit of venting, like from the engine itself as well, every once in a while. So I know Adrian is furiously taking notes in our back channel.
In fact, yeah, he said nervously writes down everything that is happening.
There you go. You never know what data point is the important ones and which ones are like grass fence that don't actually mean anything. But yeah, again, folks, the orbital launch mount, and it looks like some of the engines on Booster 7 are now coming to life, and that is another sign that we are getting actually very close to static fire testing. Up,
Oh,
and there is the siren. Wow, okay, this went a lot faster than we expected.
wow, yeah. Yeah, so Mary is reporting that they have a siren, and that is indicative that we are 10 minutes out from a potential engine firing.
I think I like very vaguely heard it at the end of in the background of our audio here there. Obviously I don't think they sounded at the launch site because no one's there, but that we just got that's supposed to be a 10-minute warning for the static fire. Of course, we don't know how precise that 10 minutes is really measured, but
Yeah.
that is a 10-minute warning for a Booster 7 static fire.
Adrian is saying that sort of based on what he's seeing and everything, we're 10-ish minutes or 2:49 is when he's estimating
All
for the
right.
firing. Yeah, so
Well, that's
just
good
about 10
news.
minutes from now, yeah.
All right, so we're roughly 10 minutes away then, folks. And so if you are just joining us, I'm sure a lot of people are going to tune in from the tweet that's saying, by the way, we're 10 minutes away. So if you're tuning in right now, here's what you need to know. Booster 7 is prop loaded and is preparing for some sort of static fire test. The things that we don't know is the exact number of engines or even which engines or engine will be static fired on the booster. That is something we will only learn once the test actually happens. But we've seen some different venting from the launch mount. Looks like they're definitely a slightly different test from what we saw the other day. But Booster 7 is active right now. We could also expect some Ship 24 engine testing later in the window, but right now Booster 7 is the active vehicle, and that's what we're showing now. And yeah, we are now under 10 minutes from a planned static fire for the booster right now.
This is where you make sure I definitely don't talk over the static fire test, so I'm going to be very careful.
I'm only going to take a couple more questions here because we obviously don't want to talk over the test, but we should have a little under 10 minutes before that occurs. So let me see real quick any other questions we can take. Jonas is asking us, did we observe any damage on the launch mount or the pad or anything after the first static fire? I don't think we saw anything like that, right?
No, actually.
Didn't think
Didn't
so.
But again,
Cones.
it was one engine.
But it was only one engine, yes.
Didn't we lose some cones?
Oh, did we lose cones?
I think, does that even count? The cones were worthy sacrifices. Let me see, what else? Just looking for any quick questions we can take here. All right, some of these questions are kind of deep dive questions, so I think we're going to come back to those later. Right now, we are maybe 8 minutes or so, and again, that's based on the 10-minute siren, so it could be more or less. But we're in just a few minutes away from booster testing right now. We are expecting a static fire test shortly. You can see that pipe underneath the orbital launch mount is venting again. I'm sure Adrian will note that. Keeping an eye on all the different visual indicators because, again, we don't get official information really about the status of these tests, so we want to note all of the venting and things that we see because that gives us an indicator as to when a firing might happen. But based on when we got a 10-minute warning siren, we would expect a T0 somewhere around 2:48 p.m. Central Time.
And it's worth noting that sometimes the sheriff is early, sometimes the sheriff is late on that. So it's not a hard, like that siren is not the hard 10-minute point. But the big thing that we would be looking for based on everything from previous days is we will see the venting on the orbital launch mount fade. And when it starts to fade, that is indicative. Faded puffing is basically what Adrian calls it. And when we see that, that is the indicator that we are seconds away from the engine firing.
And of course, once we see the engine firing, we can start to, well, at least get an idea as to if it was one engine or multiple engines. We might not know exactly, because if it's, I don't know, 10 engines or something, we won't know the exact number. But although it's usually pretty obvious if it's only one. But we'll see. We'll have to frame by frame it, and if it was anything like yesterday, SpaceX will confirm after the fact what the test was. But we don't know exactly what to expect right now. We would expect some sort of step up with previous testing. We only saw one engine fired on the booster on the last booster static fire. So we could expect a different engine or hopefully multiple engines. That would be cool. If you'll go back, the one engine static fire on Booster 7 was not the first ever super heavy static fire. They did fire 3 engines on Booster 3 way back in the day. That's as far as that booster got in its testing. But it would be nice to break the record of engines fired on a super heavy booster at once, so we'll have to see on that. Should be roughly 5 minutes away, again, based on that 10-minute warning siren. I'm going to keep an eye on it. As we get really close, I'm going to definitely stop talking. But we should have just a couple more minutes before this firing occurs. And this is all in the lead up towards, of course, a full up static fire and integrated stack testing. But right now, it's Booster 7 testing we're on the lookout for. We had a 10-minute warning siren at 2:38 p.m. Central Time. So a 10-minute warning to 2:48 p.m. Central Time would indicate a potential T0 around there, 2:48. But it should be stressed that that is not necessarily a hard limit. It could be earlier or later. But we've seen signs that engine chill has been underway. So in preparation for engine ignition, we've seen that. Those vents are not super clear signs as to how many or which engines are going to be fired, though. So we don't quite know that either.
True. And if the sirens were sort of on time in that area, again, we'd be expecting 2:48-ish as the approximate ignition time. Of course, please bear in mind it's a test campaign. Sometimes the sheriff is a little early on that siren. Sometimes they're a little late. They can always have holds that would not be visually apparent. So, but around 3 minutes from now ish is when we'd expect it.
Went up on 2:45, should be approximately 3 minutes, but until the test, but that could be different. So honestly, it could happen any minute. We don't have a precise countdown clock for these testing operations.
This is part of the fun of Texas tank watching, as we
Definitely
call it.
Texas tank watching right now. Thank you to everyone for their support and for tuning in. We'll dive back into questions later.
I think you can see a little bit of the frostering on the bottom of the booster.
Oh yeah, a little bit. You definitely can. Yep.
Yep.
That would be the liquid oxygen tank is on the bottom of the
yeah.
booster. Of course, we all knew that.
The venting has stopped a little bit.
Yep. Of course, in order to do a static
Okay.
fire, we would expect prop load, so that makes sense.
So this is one of the main indicators that Adrian has told us to look for, that we are that engine ignition would be imminent, is that little faded puff that we just saw there.
All right. We'll quiet down here. We are potentially just moments away from a Booster 7 static fire.
Another bit of a fade there. A very similar sequence to earlier this week. All right, and we do have word from that Elon is saying this is going to be a long duration firing, testing autogeneous pressurization.
That is an official tweet from Elon Musk.
So stand by for a long duration firing here from the booster. Any moment now. There are 2 views for the test.
And again, this should be any second. Wow.
Wow.
I would say that definitely qualifies as a long duration firing.
And yes, look at that.
And a successful one at that. Did anyone get the stopwatch out of that? I was like, oh, it'll be like 5 seconds instead of
That was
3.
25 to 30 seconds. We'll see what Adrian has to say as to the stop times. But yeah, 25 to 30 seconds, that was impressive. And what Elon said is it was a long duration firing testing autogeneous pressurization or autogenous pressurization, however you pronounce that word.
Autogenous. Tim Ellis told us it was autogenous.
Okay, there we go. Autogenous pressurization. So, wow, wow. Look at the legs. Look at the legs on the mount. Are those are the marks new on them?
Yeah, I don't know if that's new or not. Could be, I
See, I
suppose.
wish I would have.
I'd have to go back and A/B it, but
Adrian said it was a 21-second firing of the engine.
there we go. 21 seconds, and I don't know. Could we tell how many engines that was?
I believe it was one.
It kind of looked like just one, but I don't want to like claim that definitively because it's hard to tell with all the exhaust.
Exactly. But it looked like, from my perspective, on the camera angle on the left, that the fire column was almost completely and perfectly blocked by the leg. So one, because I would imagine if there's more than one, there would have been more exhaust down there or something like that.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, single engine per the other camera views that we have. Yeah.
All right, so a single engine on Booster 7, but fired for about 21 seconds. And apparently that was an autogenous pressurization test of the booster. So it's not just about testing the engines. We kind of touched on this earlier. It's not just about testing engines or the tanks or the ground support equipment. It's about testing all of those systems, including the pressurization systems. So
Yes, indeed. Wow. Yeah, so that was quite a firing too. Thomas, for folks who aren't familiar with the term, what does autogenous pressurization mean?
yeah, for sure. And so when you talk about autogenous pressurization, that differs from a sort of standard rocket design where you would use something like a helium or some other inert gas to pressurize the tank, the space in the tank that is not occupied by propellant. That would go for both your fuel tank and your liquid oxygen tank. And that would be accomplished by putting, small bottles of helium inside the tank and gradually releasing that gas to fill the space as the propellant drains to keep the tank at the right pressurization. The autogenous way eliminates the need for helium bottles because you're just going to use your evaporating propellants, your liquid methane and your liquid oxygen, which would both be transitioning into a gas form over time, using that gas pressure to pressurize your tanks. And so that is the difference in what we're talking about when we say autogenous pressurization. And there we see the vehicle depressurizing, I should say. You can see those vents near the middle of the Super Heavy booster are venting right now.
And I just said that was great.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
Chris,
literally
what were your thoughts?
I literally muted myself. I thought I just don't trust myself. I'll see a question. I go, oh, there was a question there, just coming from Ryan. I thought, no, it's firing. I'm glad we got that camera back. That was a bit tense for a second, but wow, that was impressive. And that's another step. Because if they repeated the single-engine test, that would still have been good. That's still another static fire test on the orbital launch mount. Remember, Booster 3 was the first to do a static fire test as a super heavy booster, but it's the first time on the orbital launch mount was the previous test. This was the second test, but this was a new one. It's another step forward. They tested something else, so it's another step. All these are baby steps. When they write the book about a city on Mars, we'll be looking back on these videos saying, "Oh, that's how they got the vehicle ready to go for this, for this role it's now providing humanity." So it's all exciting as far as I'm concerned. So
right now we're seeing the orbital launch mount is still venting a bit. I still see some venting from like the engine bay every once in a while. The depressurization vents have stopped. So we'll keep an eye on the booster. Obviously, we haven't seen anything to say like, complete depress, final depress vent, nothing like that. So there's definitely the possibility of additional testing. We've got a nice long window here. Not sure, no indication that that was the only test plan, but it is the first static fire of the day. We could also see Ship 24 testing spool up. So we're going to obviously keep an eye on all of those different vehicles and systems to get ideas as to what they might attempt next. Also, I guess we got to refresh the Elon Twitter feed. So thank you to Elon for the heads up right before that test happened. So we
that
we knew what
definitely
to
helped
expect.
set the expectation, didn't it?
Yeah. The reaction might have been different if we said, "Wait, it's still firing," and it's still firing.
But yeah, I mean, so that was definitely the longest firing of a Raptor 2 engine installed on a vehicle that we've seen.
Roger,
right?
yes.
Yes, and yeah, good. Like Chris was saying, a good sort of iterative step forward in improving out these systems in the nascent years. So.
All right, I want to catch up on some chat messages that have come through here because obviously we went quiet to address the static fire, but while we wait to see what SpaceX might be up to next, David became a PadRap member, so thank you so much. Alex with a Launch Director membership, very generous. Thank you so much for that support. Houston with a Launch Director membership, so thank you so much to that as well. Nick with a bit of a comment here saying that unlike Falcon 9, this booster should be able to hover at a thrust-to-weight ratio of 1, making catching less risky. I think we did touch on that a little bit earlier as well. Yeah, the ability to hover will definitely come into play there, so there we go. Jared has a question. Has there been any further developments on methane or oxygen production facilities at Starbase?
Not to my knowledge, no. They sort of created one out there, but haven't really seen a lot of like forward progress, I would say.
I think there was something in the environmental assessment report as well, where they were scaling back at the very least on what they want to do on site there. So I think that's why we're still seeing the big trucks rolling down Highway 4 at pace. I mean, Chris, you remember the amount of tankers they needed for a shuttle launch? It was waves and waves of tankers.
Yeah.
And that was just to fill that sphere up. So you can imagine what they need at tank farm.
Oh, I can also say it's real fun to be stuck behind that tanker when you're just going on Highway 4 and you're like, oh, like there are just too many of them to pass.
A quick message from Adrian, who's in our back channel right now, saying that it's worth pointing out that the recondenser, which is on your right-hand side camera view, you can see that black pipe that's in front of the leftmost tank of the tank farm. That's the methane recondenser. That is the system used to take gaseous methane and condense it back into liquid form to be restored. Adrian is saying that that pipe is pointing out that that pipe's not active right now, and that in yesterday's safing of the booster, it was active. And so an indicator that the booster is not being safed right now, that it's going to be remaining active and potentially some more testing. Again, we're only reporting on what we can see here, so no official updates right now, but that's what we're observing, so worth pointing that out. Thanks, Adrian.
And I can still see some like vapor wisps coming down from the engine area.
Yes,
not the
absolutely.
pipe going across, but actually coming down from the engine area as well, yeah.
Worth noting, I mean, all the other vapors from the area of the launch pad have pretty much gone away. Still seeing some wisp, like there's some more from the engine bay itself, and there's that pipe underneath the launch mount ring that was venting earlier. I see some vapor wisp from there, but it doesn't seem like it's actually venting. So that's worth pointing out. Even the ground line has gone completely inactive. No vapors there either. All things just worth pointing out there. All right, some more chat messages here. Christian asking about Phobos and Deimos. Could it make sense to use them for test landings out on the water? I think that would make sense from a test planning perspective. It's just worth pointing out we haven't seen or heard about any work on those rigs in a long time. So I'm not sure they'll be ready in any soon time. Wow, I can't speak. I don't think we've seen any evidence that they'll be ready soon to perform to support testing. Andy Lane has become a launch director member, so Andy, thank you so much for that support there. Gadget at the Capcom level, so thank you. Daryl with a PadRat membership. Zeska with a launch director membership. Again, a lot of really generous support, so thank you all so much. Josh at the Capcom level, and Sagan, I maybe is how you pronounce that, not sure. But thank you so much for the PadRat membership there. I'm going to say Sakage based on the 100 yen membership. I hope I pronounced that right. Thank you so much for the support. And then Justin saying that the new vents look similar to the same type we saw on the orbital launch mount yesterday, just at a different position. I think that might be correct. So appreciate the comment there, Justin, and for your support. Looks like the recondenser has come back active now. So again, we're looking at that black pipe on your right-hand side camera view in front of the tank farm. If that pipe is active, that could be a sign that they are safing the vehicle. Maybe that's the end of Booster 7 testing. Maybe they're doing a full recycle. Maybe they're pivoting over to Ship 24 testing. Again, plenty of time left in the window here. But we only saw one static fire so far.
And maybe it's good to sort of go over what safing means, because safing doesn't mean completely inerting the vehicle. It doesn't necessarily mean, taking it completely back to a totally, benign state. It just basically means putting it into a stable configuration.
A quick question here, Raphael asking, do we know how the booster will be cached? Is it lying on grid fins? No, there is actually a there's like a little mounting point near the top of the booster where that will actually sit on the chopsticks. So it's not by the grid fins. I think at one point that was the plan, but they changed it. And Elon talks about that in the interview with Everyday Astronaut if you want more info on that. But they will not be on the grid fins. Pocky with a Red Team membership, so thank you so much. Dan with a Capcom membership, thank you so much for the support. Jen with a Red Team membership. And then Daniel's Weather Space Station with a super chat saying, thanks for all you do, and just wow. Appreciate the support there, Daniels. Here is a question. Plutonium asking, what is the point of a static fire test when all Raptors are tested at McGregor beforehand? Any want to take that one?
So the McGregor tests actually test out the engines, right, and test out their viability and their readiness. What the static fires are doing is testing the integrated aspect of the system, testing the ability for the booster to be fueled, for that fuel to come down the lines into the engine, for the systems to actually be able to condition the engines thermally to get them ready for liftoff, and that everything from the orbital launch mount and the ground side is talking to the engines and talking to the booster, talking to the vehicle. That's the main difference. You're not necessarily seeking to validate engine performance in a static fire. You're seeking to validate the entire operation of the ground systems to allow you to get to a liftoff.
There you go. Thank you, Chris. Really quick, Alifi with a Capcom membership. Thank you so much for that support. And Space Pony for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. Thank you all so much for the support. Again, thank you everyone who supports the stream in every way, shape, and form. The memberships and super chats are a great way to do that. If you are looking for another way to support the NASA Spaceflight team, the merch store is a great way to do that. And we've got the new Mock Diamonds merch that came out just the other day, which is of course topical because we just saw some Mock Diamonds there when Raptor fired on that long duration static fire. So if you want to show your support for supersonic engine exhaust, go ahead and check out the Mock Diamonds merch. You can get it on a shirt. I think it's on a mug. Couple different ways to show off your knowledge of compressible aerodynamics, if you will. But thank you all so much for the support. The merch store is a great way to do that. There's also the metal prints out there that have been really popular. A lot of different photos from your different NASA spaceflight photographers are available for prints onto metal. It's not just a normal photo print. It is on metal. It's really high quality. A lot of people have given us a lot of positive feedback on that. So definitely want to offer that on the store as well, along with all of your other favorite NASA spaceflight merch. So thank you everyone for your support, and check it out if you're interested. Speaking of super generous support, really quickly, Randall Smith has offered a $100 super chat, which is
Wow.
super generous.
wow.
I want to thank everyone who sends their support, but when people go above and beyond, we do want to acknowledge that as well. Randall, thank you for that. Saying get a high-res FLIR cam, talking about a thermal imaging cam. You know what? Well, I may have to put that towards the FLIR fund. I don't know if we have a FLIR fund, but if we do, if we don't, we should start one. There we go. Randall, thank you so much for the support. That will definitely go towards improving our coverage. Here's an interesting question from Benjamin, who is saying, what is autogenous depressurization? Well, okay, so we talked about autogenous pressurization and using evaporating the expanding gases from your propellant tanks to pressurize the rest of the tank. But depressurization basically works the same way. You still vent the tank and you lower the pressure down to a more ambient state. That doesn't really work differently when you're using an autogenous system, as far as I'm aware, at least not in any way I can think of. But appreciate the question and the support there, Benjamin.
Yeah, sorry, same. Sorry, talking while muted. Same, Thomas.
Yeah. Cool. As much as I like to claim that I have some expertise in this field, that's why we have a team of experts on here, so people can cross-check what I'm saying. And even then, sometimes I get it wrong. We want to offer the most accurate knowledge we've got. And sometimes we would just, sometimes it's reporting on what we see out at Starbase. We would never have known that was an autogenous pressurization test without the Elon Musk tweet. So we bring all those updates best we can as well. A question from Everyday Spistern asking how many engines fired and was it the same engine from Tuesday? It appeared to be a single engine. I'd have to go back and check. Do we know, was it the same engine that they fired the other day? That's an open-ended question.
I'm waiting for Adrian to maybe type something in the back channel because
I know,
I don't
like
want to commit to it.
That's exactly what I was waiting for too. Yeah.
All right, our back channel is
Adrian says
checking. We're going to go back and compare with the footage from yesterday.
By the way, this is not the end of the testing today.
Right,
we are expecting 24 as well, so that'll be even more exciting, especially if they go for all 6 engines. And there is 24.
Yeah, definitely don't go anywhere. The road closure goes till 10 p.m. And as we've seen in past days, multiple engine firings have happened across these vehicles during single closures. So, as Chris said, by far not done for the day.
Really quick, Stefan with a PadRat membership, so thank you so much. And Monkey with another contribution to the FLIR Fund, so appreciated that as well. And Adrian went back and checked the footage and says that was not the same engine. So they fired a different engine on the long duration firing that we just saw at 2:48 p.m. Central Time. It was not the same engine that they fired the other day.
Again, that's good because that gives a more data as well, because as we were talking in the question earlier about McGregor, they fire up the Raptor 2s on proper long duration firings. Much more than you saw there with Booster. And that validates the engine before it gets sent to Starbase and then integrated into a vehicle. So then it's firing again on the vehicle in the vertical position. It's just another milestone for these Raptor 2s. Remember, it's still a relatively new engine, so it's all good.
And we do have an answer. Yeah, I was going to say we do actually have an answer. Someone was asking if it was the same engine. The answer is no. It was a different engine that was fired today.
Yep. So that's another kind of a milestone as far as Booster 7 testing goes. Still only one engine at a time, though, so still waiting for a multi-engine firing at some point. But again, you can see that recondenser active on the right-hand side of the screen. While it's not definitive in any way, it is a sign that they might be spooling down the Booster 7 testing and now pivoting towards Ship 24. Again, plenty of time in the test window, and we're going to be keeping an eye out on the Ship 24, the suborbital tank farm over there, for signs that they will pivot the attention that way. So the testing is still a very active launch site, and we are standing by to see what the next bit of testing may be, so don't go anywhere. In the meantime, though, we will still take some questions and things like that. So if you've got questions, tag us with @NASA Spaceflight, and we'll try to answer as many of those as we can. Here's a good question. Man of Sand, maybe is how you pronounce that. Not sure. Saying, how does the long burn test how does the long burn test autogenous pressurization? That's a great question. Basically, if you only fired the engine for a couple seconds, the amount of autogenous gas, evaporated fuel that you need to pressurize the tank won't change that much because you don't deplete that much fuel from the tanks. But if you fire the engine for long enough, the fuel level changes more significantly. And so by burning for longer, that gives you a better test of the autogenous pressurization system adjusting for the more drastic change in fuel level. That's my explanation for why a longer burn is better at testing the pressurization system. Very good question there. Worth noting, some people are asking if has there been any signs of Ship 24 testing. We did see them clear the area around Ship 24 earlier today, just like they cleared the orbital launch pad. It's just going to be a watch and see situation for the most part, to see what exactly they're going to be up to today. Really quick, Geoff has become a launch director member, so again, thank you so much for the generous support there. Rosen with a PadRat membership, and Anders with a Capcom member. So thank you all so much for the generous support there. Also, Heiko with a PadRat membership. So thank you all so much for the support. Robert says, shout out to the Northern UK commentator bringing SpaceX to feel at home watching from England, from Robert Singer with the £5 membership.
Nice.
There you
Say
go,
where you're
Chris.
from, though. If you say that, say about where about in England you're from, because if you're Yorkshire or even in York, that'll be quite spooky. In fact, shall we do it? I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to do it. I do it every stream.
Yeah, there you go. I was gonna say.
I hate it when I do it, but say where you're from in chat, and we'll have a quick look at who's from where. Harrogate, Nick Horton first straight in with Harrogate, which is literally like 15 miles down the road from me. Sheffield, in the Yorkshire, South Yorkshire. Oh my word, Germany, Romania. Oh, it's going so fast. Hull. Going very fast. Texas.
I'm looking through. There's always some smart people in chat who think they're on Mars or something. I'm looking out for those.
Oh yeah,
answers.
yeah. I'm on Mars. Wolverhampton, France, Leicestershire, Germany. Lots of Germans. Colombia. Wow. Czech
You're
Republic.
not watching from Pluto,
Jamaica.
chat. Come on.
Come on, you're not from Pluto. That's not right. There's no YouTube there.
Not yet.
Lots of Germans. Obviously, Adrian was in earlier. Probably attracted a lot of them in.
Maybe, yeah.
Copenhagen, South Africa. It's going so fast there.
I love it. I mean, the point is, I think we've hit almost every continent on the world at this point.
It's amazing, though. I love that.
it.
Yeah, I do love seeing where everyone's from. Slovakia. It's just incredible to see people from. It's around the world, and also when you see someone really local to you, you're thinking, "Wow."
And another way to help us, another way to drive that engagement, to hit that like button if you haven't already. That really helps. That really helps the YouTube algorithm pick up and recommend this to other people. And we're all about spreading the love of space exploration here. So the more you do that, the more that helps the algorithm pick up on it and let other people know what we're doing here.
A lot of people in chat are saying there's cranes near 24, and that's why I don't think 24 is testing. We are checking the angles just to make totally sure if it is clear of what could potentially be in the way of a static fire test. So just give us a chance on that. We're looking at it. What we think
there's equipment out there, but we don't think it's under the vehicle, basically.
Perspective's also tricky out there. Sometimes.
Yeah, we're gonna have a better look at this soon. Just give us a chance to order our robots to investigate the scene. We haven't got a Zeuser yet or anything like that, so unfortunately we can't send a robot dog out there. Or horse cam. Yeah, I'm still waiting for horse cam.
Also worth mentioning that we just heard we have microphones that can hear sounds from the suborbital tank farm, and we have heard some people in our back channel who are listening in on those feeds and say we might have heard some sound from there as well. So again, what we're gonna do is keep an eye on everything, and as we see more concrete evidence one way or the other, we'll obviously report that. But we're definitely not in any position to rule out Ship 24 testing, is I think the point to emphasize here. Oh my goodness, here we have another very generous $100 super chat from Gabriel Castleberry. Says, been here since SN4, should have gone to Capcom a long time ago. For non-subscribers, the Discord is tremendous, super friendly with like-minded people. A little something to catch up for all the streams I've just watched and liked. Much love from Callie. Gabriel, thank you so much for the kind words, as well as the support. That's really, really appreciated. And I can give a big agree on the whole Discord thing. Definitely enjoy the Discord community. It's a great way to hang out with NASA Spaceflight viewers.
A quick programming note for people in chat. If you do like Capital's Nightbot, which is YouTube's automatic moderator we don't have much control over, we'll delete your comment. Don't think it's us deleting your comment. It's just Nightbot thinking, oh, they're shouting. They can't allow that. So, because someone who actually said they're from York actually said where about in York they're from. So maybe Nightbot did them a favour there. But yeah, I saw the comment. Thank you.
And some other super chat support that's come through here. Steve with a super chat, so thank you so much. Ethan has become a Padret member, as well as Paw Angel, so thank you both for your support. Hibbert upgraded to a Red Team member, so thank you so much. Claude with a super like, so appreciate the support there. Again, definitely appreciate people liking the stream, and appreciate the super chat support. And Nate as well became a Padret member, so thank you all so much for the support. I'm going to go look through some chat, see what other questions we can take as we stand by for more testing to spool up here. Again, still a very active situation down in Starbase. Has anyone on the ISS watched a NASA spaceflight stream from the ISS? I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
I don't know. We've been surprised sometimes.
We've been surprised where we've seen our stream in some very awesome places. I'll say that without saying too much. But I think the space station might be pushing it.
Maybe they watch the videos. It's less of a latency issue, you know? Let me see. Someone in chat saying, any static fire? Yeah, yes. The Booster 7 static fire occurred at 2:48 p.m. Central Time, and I think right on cue, we're actually ready to show a replay of that. So to be clear here, this is not going to be a live view. We're going to show a replay of the long-duration static fire, about 21 seconds of a static fire of a single Raptor engine on Booster 7. They were conducting this test in order to test the autogenous pressurization system on Booster 7 per an Elon Musk tweet. But again, this is about half an hour ago, a single engine static fire on Booster 7. Here is a replay of that test. You can see that was a much longer duration firing than normal. The normal static fires that we've seen, or at least the previous one we saw on Booster 7. Here's a replay from another angle. Quite the impressive dust cloud from that firing. Given it fired for about 21 seconds. That is a long duration static fire. Again, that occurred about a half hour ago, and that was to test the autogenous pressurization system on the booster. And now back to live views as we stand by to see what SpaceX is going to get up to next here with the with testing down in Starbase. It could be potential for Booster 7 testing to spool back up, or Ship 24 testing. But we've got plenty of chat messages here to go through really quick. So McBain saying, watching from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. There you go. Love what you guys do. Quick question. What are all y'all's first jobs? I don't know if that's asking our first jobs or our, like, day jobs.
First ever job. My first ever job was in a shoe shop when I was literally like a very young boy. Let me just quickly mute that before I play echoes over the microphone. Yeah, my first ever job was in a shoe shop. I was a very, very young boy breaking up the cardboard boxes after the shoes had been sold. That was my first ever workplace experience. I think I was about 13 years old, which I'm sure is not even legal these days, but there you go. Currently, I work at Sky Sports now, doing sports media.
Mm-hmm. That round ball sport that y'all have over there.
The football, almost. It's called football.
That's weird. I thought football was something different. Chris, what was your first job? We'll go around the horn real quick.
Yeah, my first job was as a tutor.
Nice.
In high school. So that was my first job.
My first ever job was inventory for a very cool program. I lived up in Pennsylvania, and Villanova University was renovating their basketball court, or the basketball arena, and they were selling off a bunch of old parts of the arena to sports fans, and I was working on that project, managing databases. It was a pretty cool project, though. Big sports fan here, even though I'm not as in tune with the round ball that Chris B is an expert in, so I gotta up my round ball knowledge. Here is another super chat here from Rooster who says, watch your feet every day anyway, but Fleer would certainly make it better. All right, we got a lot of donations to the Fleer fund here. Appreciate the support there. Glenn with a PadRat membership, so thank you all so much. Ryan says, great coverage of always. Love from the land of the Scouse. Can I get
Liverpool.
a translation? Liverpool. Okay, I did not. No idea what that meant.
Yeah, Liverpool are Scousers.
Gotcha. Appreciate the support there. Kyle pointing out that the frost has receded on Booster 7. Yeah, there is some indications that Booster 7 may be spooling down here. Of course, that does not mean that testing is over, of course, so we're going to definitely keep the eye on all the vehicles and all the systems around. We'll provide us updates as we get them. John, watching from Escalon, California. Appreciate the support there. All Jazz with the PadRat membership, so appreciate that. Sean with the super chat. Loved this channel before it even existed. I don't know how that works, but we appreciated the support there. Potentially an old NASA Spaceflight fan before the YouTube channel existed. That's definitely a thing. Appreciate that.
Or are you the doctor? Ooh.
No, there you go.
Well, I started the site in 2005. It's NSS been going a long while. It's just the YouTube channel. It is ironically we started because of Mary. Mary was taking these amazing pictures and photographs and videos and uploading them right to the forum. Which, if anyone knows about site servers and what have you, when you're uploading like 50 megabyte videos every now and again during the day, and people start downloading it at pace, it adds up, and that's why we've gone to the YouTube channel.
And some venting. Oh yeah, up
Is
top
that the
on
top?
Booster 7. Yep. A little bit from the center of the booster as well.
I was gonna say, I think I see the center too. Yeah.
There we go. Enhance. There we go. Still a little bit up and more. Here we go.
What I also really love about the angle on the left here there is that you can see the quick disconnect on the upper arm that will reach out to attach to ship. You can see all of those attach points quite nicely there. And a little bit earlier, someone was asking about where they catch the booster. You can actually see it. In the image on the left, in between, so where the grid fins are mounted closer together, right in between them, on the right-hand side, you can see a little pin that sticks out from the booster, and that is the catch point.
Very good to point that out. Thank you, Chris. But yeah, so some more depressurization from the booster, signs that they may be spooling down Booster 7 testing. Of course, there are 2 vehicles out there, so that doesn't mean testing is done by any means. But just keeping you updated on the status of Booster 7 here. Other messages that have come through here, wanted to keep taking questions and things like that. Chris with the Capcom membership, so appreciate that support. And Dane has a question. Do you think that SpaceX will test each engine individually, or are they just proving stage 0? Again, probably don't need to test every single engine individually installed on the booster, because that's kind of the purpose of the McGregor testing, to test individual engines, and the installed tests are more testing the vehicle overall, right?
Yeah, I would not be shocked now if Elon has decided maybe to take Boost 7 off the mount and take it back to the production site, put in the center engines and go for further testing down the road. It's, again, I'm working on the road closures right now, which is, next road closure is Monday. In Elon's mind and SpaceX's mind, that's quite a long time between the next tests. It would be an opportunity maybe to think about taking the booster off the mount and get it ready for a rollback and then reinstall the center engines. But pending, again, the other thing we've got to be careful about is, like every static fire test, you never get that went well. Seconds later, they do a data review, and then they say it's passed, and then they set a launch date in the case of Falcon 9s. So I'm sure there's a data review going on right now. So there's a chance they could even repeat the test if they're not happy with something on it and they want to repeat and get the data they want. It's always an open-ended question. That's why we always keep an eye on these things. If we said, oh, that's the static fire out of the way, that's the end of the stream now, thank you, bye, that'd be a real bad decision to do, because you can guarantee there'll be some more testing going on, and we're still keeping an eye on 24. I'm not ruling 24 out just yet.
Alright, sounds good. Thank you, Chris. Of course, we'll keep everyone updated as far as testing goes. We want to give you the latest information that we have, so acknowledging that we don't know what future testing they've got planned for today. Also worth mentioning, Chris, you mentioned potentially going back to the production site. We also talked about earlier how they could actually go into Raptor engine install without going back to the production site, because they have the ability to install engines out at the launch pad.
Yeah, I was just typing in chat, ironically, because I saw a question come up saying can't they install on the pad. They can. They've got a Raptor platform, but that is more of a platform for access rather than an actual Raptor installer. They can do swap outs without individual engines now and again, but I think for the purpose of this many engines, I think it'd make more sense to do it in the relatively less weather constrained surroundings of the Mega Bay. That's my personal thought, and that's why I think it'll roll back. And if they don't roll back and install all the engines on the pad, then I will hold my hands up and say, there we go, I was proven wrong, no problem at all. But I do think for this amount of engines, I think it just makes more sense to roll the thing back and get it into a configuration where they can take it out as a full readiness for the eventual mating with Ship 24 on top, the full stack. See, anyway, but yeah, the answer to the question is yes, they can swap out Raptors at the launch site with the Raptor platform. My problem is the amount of Raptors they have to do to achieve the 33 engines again. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Back to the production site.
We shall see. A couple other messages that have come through here. Darian with a 20-pound super chat. No message, just a thumbs up. So appreciate that, Darian. Appreciate the like in the form of the super chat. Nice. And then JR upgraded their membership to the Capcom level, so thank you so much for that support. Drisbane has a question. Would a FLIR help with Starship being polished stainless steel or thermal insulators? Since polished metal is reflective, would other camera types help? You know, we appreciate all the FLIR Fund support here. I'd be lying if we said that NSF hasn't looked into that. We're not sure how helpful it would be. Obviously, all of these funds go towards improving our coverage in any way we can, and we're always considering, you know, all of the possible outcomes. We never really rule out anything, but we've definitely looked into it, and we're always looking to ways to improve the coverage. It is very possible, though, that the FLIR is not the best solution, if that makes sense.
I wonder if there's a company email going around the FLIR headquarters saying everyone got on NASA Spaceflight stream and just start mentioning the FLIR cameras.
Get them to buy a FLIR camera.
Yeah.
Here we go. Let's see. Oh my goodness, Thomas Marshall.
Wow.
I should acknowledge this really quick because it is a $150 donation to the Super Chat Fund. We shall go to the moon and then to Mars. Where shall we go after that? Well, with the Super Chat support, we'll definitely be going
Oof.
places. Thank you so much for that support, Thomas. Appreciated it. I don't know. Where are we going after the Moon and Mars? What's next?
Oh, well, I cannot wait for the there are several that I can't wait for. Missions in the outer solar system. There's Europa Clipper coming up, going to Europa at Jupiter. There's the Enceladus orbiter. There's the Dragonfly mission to Titan, which is literally basically think Curiosity and Perseverance on Mars, but now make them drones and quadcopters that
Mhm.
fly themselves from science site to science site around Titan, and that's basically what Dragonfly is. And then, oh, the mission to the outer planets. Yay. So I am very happy about that. Taking advantage of the window to get stuff out to get stuff out there. So that's where I'm really looking forward to. I think the robotic expansion of exploration in the outer solar system is going to be quite a revolution in how we understand our solar system, its formation, and our sort of place in our local galactic group.
Well, speaking about knowing where we've come from and what have you, Scott Manley's in chat. Hi, Scott. And he says
Yo,
asteroids.
yeah,
Remember when the Artemis, which was not Artemis at the time, the initial plans for, I think it was EM2 or EM3, was send a crew to an asteroid, capture it, put it in a big bag, and start taking
Yeah.
samples and bring the samples back.
yeah.
That was short-lived, but that was basically such a massive goal for NASA to get the data from that asteroid, captured asteroid, and bring it back and then do some studies on whatever they found on it. So yeah, that's asteroids are still in the game.
Absolutely. Really quick, if you missed the Booster 7 static fire that occurred just a little less than an hour ago, there is a new video on the NASA Spaceflight channel. We'll drop that link into chat, moderators, if you can. All of the replays from all the different angles of the Booster 7 static fire that occurred at 2:48 local time today, a long duration static fire testing the autogenous pressurization system on the booster would look to be successfully completed today, and we've got the video recording of that test now live on the NASA Spaceflight channel. Go check it out if you have not already. Shout out to the NASA Spaceflight video editing team for turning that video around really quickly. Some other support that has come through here. Turbo Green with a Capcom membership. Appreciate the support there as always. Pocky, another contribution to the Flare Fund. Thank you so much. Bash Coder has a question. Do we have any update on the chopsticks? Are they back in service?
Yeah, we touched on that earlier. We seen them rise and lower between the two campaigns, which they now had with the Boost 7 static fire test. So we know they can go back up and down. We've not yet seen the arms expand and contract, and I think that is a test we'll need to see ahead of any potential lift of the booster off the orbital launch mount with the chopsticks. Remember, it was raised on there since arriving with the crane, the LR11000 crane. So if the crane stays out of the way, and we know boost 7 is going to be removed, and the chopsticks start moving, we think that'll be a chopstick lift, and that will prove chopsticks are fixed.
All right, there you go. We've got another question here from Steven, who asked, do we know if SpaceX is working on when we get there Mars tech, or are they hoping that other companies will do that and SpaceX will just do transport? So talking about, surface systems and things like that will support the eventual Mars missions. Christy, you want to start us off with any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's clearly some synergy, right, between some of the overall companies that we have or that SpaceX has and that Elon has. So I guess in a way, yes, they are. I mean, they've sort of talked about boring. They've sort of talked about, cities and settlements like that to begin with. I think that's a large part of the question, though, of okay, when we are at Mars, now we're there, so now what? What is that? What does that architecture look like? And there are interesting things to sort of consider there, because there's obviously the technical element to it, and how do you support people? How do you keep them safe? But there's some really other fascinating questions about Mars colonization and settlement, like which laws are applicable? Do you get to create your own laws when you're there? If it's because it's SpaceX, do you have to follow US law? Do you have any jurisdiction there? What happens if supplies start running low? What's your decision points at certain things? There are a lot of interesting things that we just, like, as a species, haven't faced in a very long time because of how we've developed across the planet. So I think not just the tech of how we're there, but the societal and the social elements of once we're there. I've not heard a lot about that, given how close we might be to a quick timeline for landing people on another planet.
Can I just say how cool it is we're talking about this?
Yes.
Isn't it? It's now, it really is something that's a conversation. It's not science fiction anymore. It's not something we can potentially see happen. It's extremely exciting because, I mean, Chris, and Thomas as well, we went through what we all liked as a shuttle program, but we understood the restrictions of it. It was never going to see us achieve beyond Earth orbit with the vehicles and the budget we had, was basically so much money going towards the shuttle program. It was unsustainable as far as any future programs. I think the X-33 came along and it soon went away, but that was single stage to orbit. That was not a vehicle that was going to take us to other planets. It all seemed quite very much restricted in that way. And in the program, we've seen changes happen, and we're now in a phase with Artemis, with Starship, and Artemis including Starship. We're going to see this probably tag team approach to getting to the moon and then beyond. And Elon has said his goal is make life multiplanetary. That's his goal, and you can imagine how set in his ways he is on that. So we're going to have a very good opportunity to see people on other planets.
That's all, of course, very, very exciting. Thank you for the question there, Stephen. Always appreciate discussing that. Philip joined a PadRat membership, so Philip, thank you so much for your support there. And then upgraded to the Red Team membership, so Philip, thank you so much. Neil says, never mind Fleer, get yourselves a beer with the 20-pound super chat. So Neil, thank you for the support there.
I can do that.
I see. LSR with a question. When do we think we'll see the first orbital tanking test articles? I'm assuming this is referring to on-orbit refilling.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that's not part of the design architecture for the current ships, but it's obviously a huge part of the lunar program. And given that we know that the lunar architecture for HLS, the Human Landing System, needs to do sort of like they did Demo 1 and Demo 2, uncrewed and then crewed using similar systems. That's the idea that they have for this as well. So they have to do a full up uncrewed demonstration of this. So, and that's got to come about a year before the actual landing. So if you start backing all of that out, I mean, I'd say end of the year, beginning of next year, we would really need to see some movement on at least the design starting to incorporate those elements so that they can be tested and then ready for the lunar demonstration and then ready, obviously, for the HLS landing.
Right, gotcha. Joshua saying, are you guys going to be covering the Starlink launch in an hour here? I think you're off by a day. Starlink launches tomorrow. Gave me a mild panic attack there, but no worries. The Starlink launch from Vandenberg is in fact tomorrow. It will be, the launch time is 2:40 p.m. Pacific time from Vandenberg, California, tomorrow, Friday, not today. But NASA Spaceflight will, as always, plan to cover that launch as usual. Let's see, what else do we have here? I'm looking for chat for more questions. Could a Starship use propulsive landing on Titan considering the methane atmosphere? I mean, I'm sure it could.
Did we see in the original plans for Starship? I think it was back in the ITS day, maybe BFR
Mhm.
days, where there was renders of Starship on the Moon, Mars, and was it? I can't
It
remember
was
which part.
Saturn.
It was Saturn, right? There we go. So they're going for that. I mean, the Jovian moons as well would be obviously a
Yeah.
big importance, but obviously from the start, SpaceX and Elon had that design mind of not just Moon and Mars, but also deeper exploration. So they wouldn't have done that just on a whim. They would have gone that as a roadmap. So I think there's every possibility. It might be many years away, but it's certainly a possibility, and I'll take that right now.
Yeah, and and yeah, a propulsive landing on Titan, there would be no physical reason why that could not happen. Starship, one of the sort of interesting elements of the Starship design is that it can land on both planets and moons with atmospheres, and it can land on atmosphereless planets and moons as well. So very diverse in that regard. But then being there, obviously being able to pull it all out of the atmosphere and turn it into fuel, very helpful, as Chris was saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, that is a very obviously when you're landing on like a moon, you might need like well, I guess you can use the same system that will be on the human landing system variant. Like you would just use that for landing on bodies that are not planets.
Can I just say I'm really upset Adrian's not on the stream right now because I could have said all these worlds are yours except Europa. Attempt no landing there. Use them together. Use them in peace. And Adrian would be going, "Whoa, where'd that come from, Chris?" Obviously, a movie you've not watched.
It's bad. It's real bad.
He just says correct in the back channel.
Oh,
I love it.
He should just one of these days just say, "Oh yeah, I've watched that one." Just you know.
We'd all believe you. Well, actually, I don't know about that. We'd probably start testing you with quotes or something. So,
And everyone should understand we're all really good friends here, so this is all just good. This is all just good jovial ribbing between friends and nothing more.
oh man. I am not going to try to pronounce this name. I deeply apologize for such, but I don't want to butcher it that bad. They just say, great coverage as always. Here are some North Korean dollars for you. A throwback joke there. Shout out to our viewers from Norway for that support. Let's see, what else? Another question from Robin asking, are the chopsticks fully repaired now? We do not have... We have not seen the chopsticks be used yet, so we cannot say whether they've been repaired or not. So we'll watch it. That's kind of a watch and see situation right now.
Can I just say, hands up in chat if you ever thought you'd be discussing, say, let's go back 2 or 3 years, just would you ever be discussing chopsticks on a launch site, launch site tower? Did you ever imagine?
Out of context, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it doesn't, does it?
Although now I'm getting hungry for Chinese food. Anyway, later conversation.
I know. Now I kind of want that for dinner. Like,
Seriously. Frank with a question. Here comes some wild speculation. I'm putting the Chris's on the spot here because I can. Do they have a date yet for the Starship orbital test? I know there isn't a publicly announced one, but we can certainly speculate.
yeah. So that's the first part. What Thomas said. There is no publicly announced date, and they do not have the actual launch license. I know there was a lot of license yesterday online, but people largely and unfortunately mistook the FCC extension of an already granted communications license for another 6 months as progress, but it wasn't really progress. It was just the FCC going, yeah, it's just good for another 6 months whenever you go in there. So they still need the actual launch license from the FAA. So there's that. But if testing goes well and everything really falls into place, end of September, beginning of October could be a no earlier than if, and I stress this, if it all goes perfectly at this point. So I would still say this year, I would say October is a pretty good ballpark right now if things run smoothly. That's what I would say.
I would be more akin to being used to the natural delays we've seen during the progress of the Starship program, which is completely understandable, by the way. That's not a negative. That's something we expect with test programs. I think a launch this year would be a big achievement. And remember, we are midway through August almost, so it's not like it's ages away by talking about end of this year. But I think if we are we might see launch attempts before then. I think that's the key thing I'd like to remind people is that when we get to launch day proper, let's pretend everything's passed, the approvals come through, they've got the vehicle on the pad, the fuel in it, it's launch day. Everyone's lined up, ready for this launch. Be careful not to sort of like expect to launch because there's very good chance there'll be several scrubs and several even tier 0 aborts. I think we'll even see that with SLS. SLS launch on the first attempt, I would not expect. I'd expect them to be very cautious on that, as they should be, and make sure everything is ready. But I think we'll see several static fires by default because they'll have a T0 aborts. I would not be surprised with 33 engines.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'll concur with the two Chris's and just say that, and this year is still possible, but I'm not sure I'm that optimistic that that will be realistic. But I would love to be proven wrong. But of course, it's worth mentioning that every test they do on these boosters and ships gets them closer and closer.
And you know, Chris, you know, like I agree with you on SLS. You know, like getting off the ground on the very first attempt for the very first time for a rocket is very, very difficult to achieve. There's a lot of heritage there. Like if there's one that could pull it off, it might be SLS.
True, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the MPS is the same, the RS-25 is the same, the tankage is pretty much as an elevated external tank, short external tank, isn't it?
Yeah.
It'd be quite ironic if everything on the core's fine, but Orion pulls a wobbler during the last few minutes. Like, oh no, I'm not starting up. But yeah, you're right. That's a very good point. That when people talk about SLS as old hardware, yeah, it's not Raptor 2s. It's old. It's engines that have flown with Space Shuttle. In fact, it's not just the same engines. It's literally the engines that flew with Space Shuttle. But the bonus part, as Chris is bringing up there, is they've got the heritage, they've got the experience. We know they work. So that's a very good point, actually. I never actually appreciate that as much as you've just mentioned, but there's a good chance that that heritage will come into play and these engines will just sing and everything will go well.
Yeah. Bottom line, sometimes rockets surprise you in good ways.
Sure, absolutely. For folks who may just be tuning in or wondering what the current status is, obviously right now you're looking at Booster 7, which completed a long duration static fire, about a 21-second firing at 2:48 p.m. Central Time. Elon Musk tweeted that was to test the autogenous pressurization system. And so that test appeared to be successful by all means. I don't think we got any sort of official confirmation or anything, but everything looked nominal for that test. And since then, we've seen Booster 7 get depressurized. The tank farm activity has definitely spooled down. You still see some venting here and there. So the systems are not completely offline yet. The pad is still clear and all that. The road's still closed, etc., etc. What we don't know is if there's any more testing on the cards today. We do know Ship 24 is a candidate for future testing. Booster 7 could certainly have more tests ahead of it. There's plenty of time for testing in today's window, which extends until 10 p.m. Central Time, so a little bit over 6 hours left to go. But what we don't know is what exactly SpaceX has planned for the rest of the day. We're not going to end our coverage here because they could certainly spool up testing again very quickly. But we'll keep you all updated as best as we can, and we can continue to take your questions in the meantime.
There's a quick shout out to Robert Hobson again. Every single stream. Probably one of our best supporters ever, who's done 20 gifted Red Team memberships there.
Oh,
now,
wow.
If you want to keep yourself occupied during this, waiting to see what's happening next, the Red Team membership will allow you some looks at some preview clips and some photographs and other things like that. There's lots of bits and bats in there, which you'll really enjoy, which you've not yet seen. Thank him chat by all means. If you will, I don't know how it totally works with the YouTube gift memberships. I think it does pick people out at certain amounts of time they've been on the stream or something like that, and they get gifted it. Robert doesn't personally go through each one. So if you've got a gift membership for Robert Hobson, by all means thank him in chat, because that is great support and a really nice thing, for the community, because that's just basically spreading the joy. bread and a joy. Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, we did. Thank you. And thank you, Robert, for your support as always. Let's see. Oh, okay. So this is circling back to us earlier question about landing a Starship on Titan. Clarification, wondering if they mean that could a Starship ignite the methane-based atmosphere on Titan if it tried to land there? Worth noting that Booster 7 is continuing to depress vent on your screen right now. But the question, so changing the spirit of the question, would it be safe to light a Raptor engine in a methane atmosphere?
Well, that would depend on the part per million count and concentration of the methane. Titan's atmosphere is primarily composed of 94.2% nitrogen, 5.6% methane. I think we'd be fine. Much the same way that lighting a match does not ignite the hydrogen in Earth's atmosphere.
Gotcha. Okay, good point there. But that's an interesting question. It's not a problem you really have to think about.
Yeah, you're
a
adding
lot of the
methane to
time.
methane there, but I mean, when you talk about an overall 5.6% concentration, it's still a good question. My gut says that's low enough that, yeah.
Right, yeah. Here is another question that I think we actually know the answer to. Keith, do you think there will be 3,000 Starlinks in orbit before the Starship orbital test flight? Yes, because there's already 3,000 Starlinks in orbit.
I was gonna
In
say,
fact,
I thought we crossed that earlier,
I
right?
think they actually crossed that milestone on the most recent launch. It depends on how you count it, because there's like the amount of spacecraft in orbit, there's the amount of spacecraft ever launched, there's the amount of spacecraft, like operational in orbit. Like there's a couple different ways to count how many Starlink satellites are actually in orbit at any one time. But depending on how you count it, you can get above 3,000, and even if another ways will all be above 3,000 fairly soon. There's another batch of Starlinks launching tomorrow from Vandenberg. I think we'll expect another one from Cape Canaveral the following week. So a couple Starlink launches expected this month, and the 3,000 mark will be crossed by all different accounts in the very near future, most likely before Starship makes an orbital attempt. Let me see what else here. Electric Droid entered the membership program at the Capcom membership, so thank you so much for the support there. Blackjack with a Capcom member as well, so thank you for the support. Oh, and Ian with a Launch Director membership. So Ian, thank you so much for the support there. Appreciate it. There we've got a quick picture-in-picture of the roadblock, which is still very active, not opening the road anytime soon. So that's our biggest indicator that when testing is about to wrap up, you'll see a bunch of vehicles line up at the roadblock as they prepare to go back to the launch site and resume work out there on site. And since that hasn't happened yet, we're not of the. It would be premature to end our coverage here because clearly, still an active test site. But we'll keep an eye on that, of course, and let y'all know if anything changes.
Oh, hello. What's that van doing? Oh, he's turning. Sometimes we watch the vehicles line up next to the roadblock. And earlier, if you were in Starbase Live, there's quite an amusing part where that sheriff or deputy was parked deep into the bushes, and the cars that were speeding down Highway 4
Oh yeah.
must have just got a glimpse at the last second and just caught him and thought, oh, better slow down.
I am Joe with a Capcom membership, so thank you so much. And Dave with the Red Team membership. Appreciate everyone's support there, as always. I'm going to keep seeing what else. Oh, and Darren pointing out there's only about 2,700 currently in orbit, according to Mr. Jonathan McDowell. Yeah, I think the 3,000 mark that just got reached might have been the number of launched total. So they've launched 3,000 satellites over the course of the program, but they're obviously not all still in orbit. Let's see. Why didn't we see the water deluge system active during today's test? I think one engine maybe just doesn't require water deluge.
Yeah,
That might just be a system that they don't have to bother with until they're firing more than one engine.
I'd go with that.
Let's see, what else? Here's a question maybe for you, Crispy. Ed Burley is asking, what does a lifetime L2 membership get you on YouTube? You want to talk about
yeah.
that?
Right. So basically, L2 is separate from the YouTube memberships. Obviously, they can't integrate the two because you know what programming is like. L2 is something we started with the NSF site in the early days of the site to help us cover the server costs, and it's just something that we've kept going all the way through. And I'm very proud of it. I must say, it's a really very deeply. So you can tell I'm tired now, can't you? It's got a lot of depth to it. It really is. We don't promote it as much as we should do because you end up getting someone joining just for the sake of like downloading as much as they possibly can. You'll never know it'll end up on YouTube before long. So we're very careful about how much we promote it. But L2 itself is massive. It really is a huge database. Everybody who joins it tends to be absolutely blown away by how much is in there. We have membership levels at 2 months. I recommend if you're not joined L2, just join it for 2 months and just see how you like it. You'll get a resub notice near the end of the 2 months, give you the option of renewing or just let it run out. We don't do auto renewals. It's very manual in that way. And on that renewal, you get a choice to go in lifetime because we had several people who joined as 1 year members in the early days and they went 3-4 years in, renewing every year. And they said, look, maybe there's a lifetime option, which would be at a tier which would allow us to stay lifetime and you'd get a nice little, large amount of support at the same time. And that option is available on demand, where if you wanted it, you just send me a message on the forum and I'll tell you how you can do that. And with L2 Lifetime, you'd also get Lifetime Discord because I've got a role I can give you, which has got some extra perks in our Discord where you can then stay on our Discord forever as well as part of the Lifetime membership. So just send me a message because I'm quite hands-on. We don't leave things to automated bots or anything like that. You literally are dealing with me, if that's a good or a bad thing. So just send me a message about L2 Lifetime on the forum and I will get back to you and tell you how it works.
And near the top of Booster 7 right now, still some venting every once in a while. So still working on depressurizing the Booster 7 vehicle. Thank you, Chris, for the info on the membership program, including the L2 subscription, which is, of course, on the website side of NASA Spaceflight. For a status update on testing today, in that picture-in-picture top left, you can still see that the roadblock is active. And basically, until that roadblock is ready to come down, it's premature to say that testing is done for the day, especially considering the window extends all the way till 10 o'clock Central Time, 10 p.m. We saw a Booster 7 static fire that appeared to be successful earlier today, and it remains to be seen whether testing will continue either on Booster 7 or on Ship 24. It's possible they're done for the day, but that can't be said for sure, but without that the road being opened. And so that'll be our indicator whether or not testing is going to continue. But until that roadblock is down, it's too early to say the testing is done for the day. But yeah, I'll try to. But again, we're going to go through chat. If you have any more questions, please feel free to ask, and we'll try to answer best we can here.
There's some sheriff movement there, isn't there? There's another sheriff. It could be a deputy for all I know. Is there any way to know if there's a sheriff or a deputy in that car? Is there any different kind of markings on American cop cars?
Most of the police cars in the states where there are sheriff offices, the police cars from the sheriff's office just all say sheriff on them because they belong to the office rather than like the sheriff, So, from the car itself, it's usually you can't really tell for sure.
Right. Well, that one just pulled up, had a chat with the other one, and we'll see what happens from there. Maybe they were updating them. But yeah, either way, it's been a good day, even if this is the end of testing, because it's just all progress. I was saying it earlier in the stream, so I'm going to repeat myself a little bit, but these baby steps, which could be classed as baby steps if you want to class it that way, personally, I think they're quite big milestones, are all progress towards what we're looking for here, where we'll actually see the world's most powerful rocket ever launch on an orbital launch attempt. That day is not going to be far away, especially if you're as busy as I am, or we all are. Days tend to go really fast. So before we know it, we'll be doing a live commentary stream on Booster 7, Ship 24, orbital launch attempt. Mm-hmm. And when that thing takes off, wow. I mean, that's going to be something else.
I got a couple questions coming into chat. Billy asking if we could expand upon what the autogenous something or other is. For sure. So the autogenous pressurization is the system that we're talking about, and this is what Elon talked about in his tweet right before the static fire today. And in fact, if you go to, not to shamelessly self-plug, but if you go to the NASA Spaceflight Live episode with Tim Ellis this past weekend, we also talked about autogenous pressurization there. And what that means is instead of using a bottle of helium or something like that to pressurize the tanks that hold your propellants in the vehicle, because you do need to pressurize them, especially as you get into really high stress environments like a rocket launch, to help keep the structure sturdy, you keep the tanks at a specific pressure. Sometimes it's also used to control your propellant flows, although on Raptor engines they have pumps for that kind of thing. But the tanks need to be at a certain pressure during flight, and you can do that by opening bottles of helium or something like that inside the tanks, or you can just let the naturally expanding gases from your methane and oxygen fuels, or propellants I should say, and use that to pressurize the rest of the tank, the empty space in the tank. So that's basically what autogenous pressurization is, and by firing the engines for a bit of a longer period of time than just a couple seconds, the fuel level changes more significantly, and thus that's a better test of that kind of pressurization system. So that's what Elon's talking about in his tweet, and that's what they tested on Booster 7 today. Hope that answers your question. We got another question here. Bill asking any thoughts on why we're not seeing any frosting on the tanks during the during these tests, and we saw a very small frost line at the very bottom of the liquid oxygen tank, which is the bottom tank of the booster, right before the test. You wouldn't see a whole lot simply because they don't need to fully fuel the booster. If you're only firing for, even today's test was like 21 seconds or something, you don't need to fire you don't have to fully fuel the vehicle. You only need to fill it for a couple seconds of firing. So they don't fully fuel the vehicle. That would take too long. It's unnecessary. And so that's why the frost is not super visible on these tests. They're all very, very minimally fueling the vehicle. Very different from like a cryoproof, for example, where they apply the cryogenic fluid, usually just nitrogen, to the entire vehicle. They look very, very different. That's the difference. Lucas, thank you for the PadRat membership as well. Appreciate the support there.
Here's a good question, by the way, from Mattia, who asks, when NSF Live with Elon? Funny because we've had some really great guests. I mean, I must say, Chris from Astra and also Tim from Relativity were amazing guests. You do get to, when you have such a long time with a guest like on NSF Live with 90 minutes, you tend to get a real idea of what they're like. And I've got to say, I was super impressed with Chris from Astra. He just, everything, you get a sense of what someone's like rather than their answers. You know, you can always get somebody like a CEO who gives great answers, but when you get the personality behind it as well, I think Tim and Chris just really, really, really struck me as the kind of people you can trust to really give the best shot to make things work for their company. So, yeah, I would love to see what Elon was like in that scenario, because a lot of things he does are quite fun YouTubes. Apart from the Tim ones, they're serious, but some of the recent ones he's done, basically just talk about Dodge and stuff like that, you know. So having him sat down just to get, you know, his opinion on where he's taking this, because he is so important to not just SpaceX, not just the Starship program, but also to many other companies such as Tesla and the solar power, where we're going to move forward with the Boring Company, things like that. It'd be fascinating to get him on. It really would be.
Certainly would, absolutely. Really quick, I think I want to intro another commentator to the team today, because again, we are continuing our live coverage of a day of Starbase testing, and the window is still open, the roadblock is still up, potential for more testing. So we're going to stay live for a bit, and we're going to bring on Alex to the commentary team. Alex, how are you doing today?
Well, I think I missed all the action today, but yeah, more depressed, I guess. See, it doesn't let me speak.
Oh, I'm used to that, Alex. Don't worry.
Yeah, you know, just hanging out here a bit, trying to bring a little bit more voices, because I think, Chris, you're leaving us, right?
Yeah, I think I've got I've got a to-do list still to do yet, and I end up finishing 2 o'clock in the morning, thinking, "Oh, I've got 2 hours sleep. Uh-oh, what do I do now?" Before you know it, I'll be even more useless than I normally am.
No, Crispy, thank you so much for hopping on commentary today. We appreciated it as always. And that's Chris Bergen, managing editor of NASA Spaceflight, rotating out of the commentary team for now. And thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Have fun.
All right, we got another question here regarding a lot of people asking about the catch attempt prospects here, and some question here. What do we think would happen if the chopsticks were affected during launch and then unable to catch a returning booster? Would the booster ditch into the ocean?
Interesting where the decision point for that would be. I mean, if the tower is completely incapable of catching the booster and they know it, it wouldn't make sense to fly it back. So yeah, I'm kind of assuming that this is operating in much the same way that the Falcon 9s do it, in that they're not actually targeting the launch / landing site until the landing burn begins, and then that's what actually gets them onto the final proper course. So it's kind of how I've envisioned this operating as well. Which would make the answer to your question basically yes, it would ditch away from the launch site.
There you go. I mean, and that's very similar to how Falcon 9 does it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's also hard to guess. Like, how do you say that the chopsticks are broken or something when, like, I don't know. Like, it's probably complicated, right? If something were to happen, sort of like what happened on last Friday, that the whole huge hydrogen hydraulic leak, excuse me. If that were to happen, that that's quite different, I guess, so to speak. Like, yeah, I don't know how you will be able to tell the booster that the chopsticks are broken in, unless you send some command to the booster. Like, that's a little bit tricky, I'd say.
Gotcha. Really quick, Holger with a Red Team membership. Appreciate the support there as well. Again, for those tuning in, we're standing by to see what other testing SpaceX might get up to today. We're keeping an eye on the roadblock as well as all the vehicles and the tank farm, etc. But keeping an eye on chat as well, trying to bring in some questions. So if you got more questions, tag us with @NASA Spaceflight. I know we got a couple questions asking for the next Cape flyover. Stay tuned. It's coming soon. But coming soon. Stay tuned. Let's see. Matt with a question. How would oxygen or methane be brought to cryogenic temperatures on Mars? I'm assuming this is talking about refilling Starship vehicles.
A lot of energy. Lots of them. You need a lot of energy to actually bring those down to cryo temperatures. So I guess, they could bring up these nuclear reactors that NASA is working on these days. I think that's quite a good thing that they could bring up, just to generate a lot of mass efficient power for the compressors and all of that, to be able to make it cryogenic. Yeah.
See the recondenser active on the right hand side of this camera view, by the way. Not sure if that means anything. I'm sure Adrian will let us know. Anyway, really quick, while we're working on figuring out what SpaceX might be up to yet, I'm gonna ask a quick favor from everyone who's on the stream right now. We got over 12,000 people watching right now. Folks, can I ask you all a favor? Near the bottom of your screen, and this might only apply if you're not a YouTube member, there's of course the join button, and I want you to take a look at that and see if you see a discount for your first YouTube member. We haven't received any official information regarding this. Rumor on the street is that YouTube might currently be offering some percentage off of your first month membership if you join the YouTube membership program. That's the member where you see people join at the PadRat membership or the Capcom membership, things like that. and that gives you different membership perks. So we would actually appreciate your help if you can let us know if you see that promotion or not. We don't want to claim like, hey, YouTube is offering XYZ thing, because we don't actually know. YouTube didn't tell us anything. So let us know if you see anything, and let us know in chat. I'll take a look and see what people are saying. Some people say they don't see it. Some people are saying it's 50% off. Some people say no. Some people say 20% off. See, there's a couple different answers, this is why we're asking. It's possible that it's based on region, like different countries or different states even or something get different discounts. Who knows what
Yeah, I
might
tried
be.
it too, and I cannot see it either. So yeah, it
Yeah, it
could
might not be
very well
available
be
in
that.
Europe or something like that. I mean, I really don't know. Some people say nothing. 20% from Canada. All right, maybe we should have asked for percentage and where you're from.
Ooh, that's a bad.
The ultimate engagement perk. Someone says California 20% off. Okay, we appreciate all the help here, everybody. Nothing in France. Nothing from New Jersey. All right, so maybe it might not be regional. It could also just be random. I don't know. Sometimes YouTube is like, okay, we're
You
just
get a
going to take
discount?
50%
You
of
don't get
people
it.
and,
You get it?
say you get to try this out,
you?
this new thing or something.
See, this is a new version of the "Where are you watching from?" question.
Right, yeah. All right, thank you all so much in chat for the support there. Me personally, I think I'm getting the 50% off thing. Yeah, fun fact, I'm not a member of the NASA Spaceflight YouTube channel. I don't know if that makes me a bad NSF host or something.
See, I saw that car at the roadblock doing a funny thing there. Almost made me think that it was going to the pad.
Right, the one car left and it was just replaced by that pickup truck. So I
Yeah.
don't know what's up with there. Road's
I
still
was
closed.
just like, oh my god, they're all...
But anyway, got some new memberships have come through here. I don't know if anyone, maybe some people saw the promotion and said, "Hey, I can join in." So I want to say thank you to Heather Smith for the PadRat membership, as well as Starxio also at the PadRat member, and Vulcan as a PadRat member. Had some Red Team memberships as well from Dustin and Maxim, I think is how you would pronounce that. So thank you everyone for that support, and Schmellit with a Capcom member. So thank you everyone for your support there.
Good deal.
And thank you everyone for your help on the YouTube membership front. Again, YouTube didn't tell us anything, so the only way to find out is basically to ask you all what the heck you guys see. Thank you for the help there. Buttons Jr. with a Capcom membership as well. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right, back to Starship questions. The orbital launch mount's still venting, and the recondenser's still active. So it's the ground systems are all still active here.
Did the venting from the OLM just like increase too?
Yeah, and the subcoolers are on.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Right, so you know how we didn't
right.
stop the stream? This is why we are still live. All right, so we got a couple signs here. Here, everyone, I'm going to point out the different things on screen that we're looking at and reacting to right now. Let's start with the booster. At the bottom of the booster on the left-hand side of the orbital launch mount, you see some venting there. That is usually a sign that propellants are flowing back towards the vehicle again. Also, the methane recondenser, which is that pipe in front of the orbital launch tank, or the orbital tank farm, excuse me. Near the left-hand side of those big tanks, you see some venting from that stack there. That's from the methane recondenser, so that's a sign of methane flowing. And then on the very right-hand side, there's the LOX subcoolers, the liquid oxygen subcoolers. That's part of the liquid oxygen system. Again, signs that liquid oxygen may be flowing. So all of these are indicators of imminent propellant loading. So this has now the different indicators that could point to a recycle or another countdown for the booster. A sign of maybe Booster 7 is going to get some more testing here. And this is why the road is still closed and why we are still live. If they had opened the road, different conversation. But this has the appearance of potentially some more testing. And also, so we were talking about the membership program, and thank you everyone for their help on that.
Wow.
I think that prompted some other people to join the membership program, and I hope you all will greatly appreciate all of the different perks, where there's a lot of cool stuff you get as a YouTube member. I want to go through this really quick. Kevin with the PadRat member, so thank you. Ken with the Launch Director member, so thank you so much. James with the Capcom member. TJ with a Red Team member. Merrick with a Red Team member. Overlord Raven with the Red Team membership. Canoog maybe, or Noog, I'm not sure how that gets pronounced, for the Capcom member, so thank you so much. Ian with the PadRat member, thank you so much. Matthew, Capcom level. Greg Hawk with the PadRat member. Thomas with the Red Team member, and Vulcan with the upgrade to the Launch Director membership. That is a lot of new members and a lot of upgrades as well. Hope you all enjoy
Yeah.
the different perks. If you're Capcom or above, we'll see you over in the Discord channel. Greatly appreciate everyone's support there. The membership support is a really, really helpful way to support NSF coverage, because that recurring membership really helps us continue to improve our coverage. So thank you.
And also too, thank you, because that to me, the trust that you have placed in us with that means a great deal. You know, we love to share our passion with all of this, and we love that you all love it too, and you love our infectiousness and the good answers to the questions along the way. So really truly, like, thank you. That vote of confidence in us also means a great deal to us. Thank you.
We're still getting more coming in here. Steven at the Red Team membership level, Tuppy Max at the Capcom level, John with the PadRat membership, and Morph with the Red Team member. Want to make sure I read that right. And as I say this,
There's
more
more.
come in. Wraith at the Red Team member, Jacob as a Capcom, and Antonio as a PadRat. Again,
And
thank you
Adrian
everyone so much.
And
is
to the
just
and to
now
the
putting out the ground lines on near the booster and the launch mount getting frosty. So that's another indication that things are getting cool. Sorry for
X.
interrupting you, Chris, but
No,
wanted to
no,
point that
all
out.
good, all good. Yeah. I mean, as we continue to swing back into testing here, but likely what that meant, right, in the amount of time that we've seen between things, how the launch site sort of quieted down, would sort of indicate that they detanked the vehicle, and did a full recycle, right?
It does seem like that. At least the way that it seemed before, it was like spooling down. We weren't sure what's gonna be happening for Booster 7, and now it's spooling back up. And actually, you know, before when they did the static fire, we saw a little bit of frost on the bottom of the LOX tank. It went away, and you never know, maybe come back now. Obviously not now, as in within a few minutes, but you know, once they're with all the spool up and everything, all the action at maximum, as we've seen earlier in the window. So yeah, that could be a thing, I guess.
Can I get a request for Mr. Michael Baylor to get a camera pointed at the chopsticks potentially? Chat is saying that the chopsticks are moving, and I think
Yeah,
I
they're going
concur.
down. They're down for some reason, which
Wonder what
makes
that's
me
all
think.
about.
Yeah, is it that they have stopped with firings?
But then why are they recycling?
That's a good question too. So, what are you doing, SpaceX?
The confused media button has been pushed. Yeah, you can see the chopsticks. If you look at the tower, the chopsticks are going down right now. I don't have an explanation for this.
Yeah, we were thinking that they moved them up to be able to clear them from any sort of a static fire. So
Right.
now that we're seeing them coming back down, that's sort of like, but they are also spooling up the tank farm
Right.
and seem to be recycling. So that's two conflicting things happening here.
Chat says a chopstick static fire? What would that even mean?
And
More
more
venting from the
depressants.
top of booster. Really quick, Ryan Weber with the $10 super chat. Appreciate the support there. I'm not going to put the message on screen because I vehemently disagree, but I appreciate the support. talking bad about a rocket dear to me, so I'm not going to put that on screen.
So you can just pick and choose which ones you show.
Listen, I thanked him for the support, which is my job here. I don't have to put it on screen if I don't want to.
What truths did he speak about Ares 1X?
No. Truth is a matter of an opinion there, Chris.
Uh-oh.
All right, now we got a van
I
at
believe, yeah.
the roadblock.
Interesting.
We'll keep an eye on it.
Hmm.
I'm going to bring in a question here. Tom Berry wants to know, what do we reckon the reason that they're not going for the full 20 Raptor static fire is? Anybody?
Why do you think if I really had to say it's probably like an incremental step to after what happened in July, it's probably just an incremental step to do various testing on various engines, gather different types of data that they need before actually committing to a larger ignition. Now, the other thing with 20, the more Raptor engines you add, even if you lower the overall thrust that they ignite at, which we were talking about a bit earlier in the stream, you can still reach a point where you start to violate what the hold down clamps can achieve with just a partially fueled booster. So it might be that they need to, I think we were talking about this earlier, Thomas, right? Like it might be that they have to completely fuel the booster in order to light all 20. It might be that by the time you get to 20, you actually need a ship on top or some added mass or something there. So why haven't they gone for all 20 right out of the gate? Incremental buildup, just like we've seen them do on the ships too, right? They didn't just come right out of the gate firing all 3 and all 6 on the ships. They've taken an incremental approach.
There you go. Thank you, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
So folks, as you can see on this camera view here, you can see some folks lining up at the roadblock. That is going to be our indicator that perhaps the tank farm spooling up was a false alarm. Definitely looks like there are crews preparing to return to the pad, which will mean that at least for the time being, testing is going to be wrapping up here. Plenty of time left in the window, and a couple hours they could come back. If that happens, we'll resume our coverage later. But this is going to be our indicator that they are going to wrap up testing for the day. Booster 7 did complete a long-duration static fire at 2:48 p.m. Central Time, and that is the testing that they've completed so far today. Stay tuned to the NASA Spaceflight channel for future coverage as always. But really quick, before we wrap up, here we got a bunch of new members that have come through here that I want to thank really quickly. Scott at the PadRat membership level, thank you so much. Odie Bear as a Capcom, Tim Collins as a Red Team member, Mike M as a PadRat member, Doug Berry as a PadRat member as well. Thomas Marshall became a Capcom member, and Darth Kylis with a Red Team member. Thank you all so much for your support. Dean with the Red Team membership, and Dave as a PadRat member. Thank you all so much for that support. Matt Kroc has a message here as well. Your part-time tank watcher is here. Mad that I missed the static fire because of school, but will remain until the stream is over. Expect another super chat when Nick gets here. Hey Nick, you want to say hi really quick?
I don't even think we've done a comms check here, so this might not be good.
Hey, you sound fine to me, Nick. Thank you so much for the
good. Hello.
Nick was gonna hop in and help us with commentary, but it sounds like we're wrapping up the stream. So quick hi from Nick, though. Appreciate it, Nick, as always. And then Flawed Perspective, with a quick question, we'll wrap up here. Can we explain how depress works without dumping CH4 into the atmosphere from Booster 7? Alex, want to take that really quick?
Can you explain?
Oh, well, I'm not sure. I just know they do a deep press. if that's the, I guess that's not the answer that they were expecting, right? I will have to look it up. Yeah, that's my answer, I guess.
All right, we'll come back to that on some future coverage there. When we wrap up here, here's a quick official confirmation as we wrap up here from SpaceX. Full duration 20-second static fire of Super Heavy Booster 7. Of course, they only fired one engine. And full duration, of course, referring to the full planned duration, not the full duration of like a mission. But confirms that they reached the duration that they were planning to today with a single engine static fire on Booster 7. Another milestone in the SpaceX testing, or the Starship testing program, I should say. But that is going to do it for live coverage for now. We will spool up coverage when SpaceX resumes their testing. If that's it for today, we will also be live tomorrow for a Starlink launch from Vandenberg, so stay tuned for that. But let's go around the horn and thank everybody who has been on commentary today. First off, Alex was on commentary. Alex, thank you so much for hopping on today.
Thank you for having me. And I was about to say that explains the chopsticks going down.
Right,
I guess.
yeah.
So there you have it.
Also on comms with us today, Chris Gebhardt, the assistant managing editor of NASA Spaceflight, offering some commentary today. So, Chris, thank you so much for your help today.
My absolute pleasure. Good to see the long duration static fire under their belt.
Sounds good. Michael Baylor, thank you so much for your support in producing today's stream, pushing the buttons, pulling the levers as you do. Stream couldn't happen without you, so appreciate that. My name is Thomas Burkhart, news director for NASA Spaceflight, and offering some commentary as well. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for the support through the super chats and members and things like that. We really do appreciate it. Hope you'll tune in to future spaceflight news coverage. But until then, this is the NASA Spaceflight team signing off from Starbase, Texas. We'll see you all next time.
We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCP chamber pressure looks good. Traveling up. Roger roll, Atlantic.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight downside, SC off. Bring in SC off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.